demonetized. I got to go talk them out of it.
Welcome back to the Occult Rejects. Tonight, we're going into one of the most consequential and still unresolved questions of the modern era. Where COVID actually came from? What kind of research was being conducted before the pandemic? Who was involved in that research? And whether we have ever been given the complete story. And I've got two guys here tonight who have spent a hell of a lot of time digging through that paper trail. First returning to the show. Someone's making noise.
I've got you.
Is somebody not playing the thing? Oh, there we go. It's gone. Sorry about that. Somebody was breaking in.
Okay.
First, returning to the show is George Howard. George is a North Carolina businessman, former United States Senate staffer, UNC Chapel Hill graduate, co-author of peer-reviewed scientific research, founder of the Cosmic Summit, and host of the Cosmic Tusk. Most people probably know George from his work surrounding the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, but tonight we're talking about a completely different catastrophe. Joining him is Jim Haslam, an independent researcher and author of COVID-19 Mystery Solved. It leaked from a Wuhan lab, but it is not Chinese junk. Jim has spent years going through scientific papers, grant proposals, FOIA records, congressional testimony, emails, and research documents, trying to reconstruct the research network behind SARS-related coronavirus work before the pandemic. He also co-authored a 2025 submission to the World Health Organization's SAGO Origins panel with economist Jeffrey Sachs. And these guys aren't coming here tonight with the standard version of the lab leak theory. Jim's argument is much more specific and much more controversial. He believes important parts of the research trail led not simply to Wuhan, but back through American institutions, including the University of North Carolina and Rocky Mountains Laboratories, with the 2018 DARPA proposal known as Project Defuse, occupying a central place in the story. WHO's scientific advisory group has directly challenged major parts of Jim's interpretation, and the available scientific literature currently gives greater weight to zoonotic spillover while still acknowledging that a research-related accident cannot be conclusively ruled out without additional evidence. And this conversation has moved beyond podcasts and Substacks. On July 29th, 2026, George and Jim were both inside the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee hearing where Dr. Anthony Fauci appeared under subpoena. George was sitting directly behind Fauci in the hearing room, visible throughout the televised proceedings. Fauci repeatedly invoked his Fifth Amendment rights rather than answer the committee's questions. George and Jim subsequently submitted a cited statement for the congressional record asking investigators to examine UNC, Duke, and other parts of the American Research Network. So tonight, I don't want to do slogans. I don't want to hear trust the science. I don't want to hear a lab leak thrown around like those two words settle the case. I want to know what the documents actually say. What does Diffuse prove? What doesn't it prove? What happened at UNC? What happened at Rocky Mountains Laboratories? What was being proposed for Wuhan? What evidence connects those pieces together? What is documented fact? What is circumstantial evidence? And where does Jim's reconstruction require an inference? And maybe, most importantly, what evidence would prove these guys wrong? George and Jim, thank you very much for coming to the Occult Rejects tonight. Before I introduce you guys, let me introduce the other co-hosts joining me. Tonight, we got Kaiva back with us. What is going on, Kaiva? How are you?
Hello, everybody. I look forward to this conversation. This should be really fun. I look forward to all the information you have to share with us. Everybody can find me at 11kaivarose33.com. I practice traditional astrology, so you can also follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. I post daily and weekly astrology videos. Thanks.
Thank you so much for making it. I really appreciate it. We got my man, the Magus. He's here. Brandon, what is up?
All great things are up as we root ourselves into the earth, trying to figure out all the crazy shit that's been going on for the past 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And it feels like Jim and George have some answers for us, or at least better questions. And I think that's a great place to go. Magus in the media, that's what we're here for. Myth, magic, and meaning in the stories that you and I love. And Nick, like I tell you all the time, we are within a grand story. And this is what I love. And I love that you have all of us here together. So thank you, my friend. This is going to be a great one. It's time to travel deeply down the rabbit hole. Let's go.
Hell yeah. Thank you very much for making it, sir. And my boy, Bragg Catalyst Jones, man. Glad to get you on here, sir.
Yeah, man, I'm super excited, but I'm also feeling like the black sheep here because I don't even think that viruses are real or exist. So, you know, I'm friends with the whistleblower Justin from Pfizer, who came out and had his documentary and everything. So I'm very interested. I'm gonna hear everything that everybody has to say with an open mind, and hopefully I can add some value to this podcast.
Hell yeah. Thank you for coming, my man, though. I appreciate it. And last but not least, we got the Loon with us. What is going on, Judith? I'm so glad you made it.
I'm glad I made it too. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I'm very curious and wondering if we all have been, how can I say, a sleight of hand has been played with us when it comes to who and where this comes from.
Just more lies on top of lies about the whole situation in general. Do you want to let everybody know where they can find you?
Oh, yes, you could. Yes, you could find me on YouTube, X, and Spreaker as The Loon.
Awesome. Thank you so much. George, I know you've been here before, and I did leave out some specifics for you, kind of. So if you want, you can promote TTN or anything else that I may not have mentioned. But please let everybody know what's up with you and where they can find all your amazing work.
It's a pretty serious podcast, so you know. But yeah, I'm my mostly unserious stuff. Well, I think ancient history is pretty serious. It can be found at Cosmic Summit, which is the event and also the brand that we have, and we should be going out to them on YouTube right now. So hello, my audience too, if that rarely functioning feature happens to be working. But we're on all major platforms at Cosmic Summit. I also have a blog since 2010 called The Cosmic Tusk that needs a post right now, but it has over 1,000 behind it, and they're all timeless because it concerns something that happened 13,000 years ago. So but yeah, so I'm the Cosmic Tusk as well. Cosmic Tusk and Cosmic Summit. Thank you very much for inviting us.
No, of course. Thank you very much for coming on. I don't know if people had heard his last episode when he was on here about maybe a month ago. Highly suggest to go back and check that out. And plus, for people who heard me talk about Cosmic Summit 2025 many of times on the show, this is the man who put that together. So go check him out.
And we're going to do another one next year in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Yep. Getting some stuff from the convention center tomorrow.
Awesome. I'm very excited for that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, George. And we got Jim. Jim, please let everybody know whatever you'd like to promote about yourself or let people know.
Yeah, I am the author behind the book that I guess we'll talk about today and the contents of it. It's called COVID-19 Mystery Solved. It leaked from a Wuhan lab, but it's not Chinese junk. It came out a couple of years ago. I would have thought by now I would have suffered an attack or a counter from a virologist or a scientist that I've challenged in the book, and they haven't. So they all know who I am. And who am I? I'm a lab leaker. Basically someone that spent an inordinate amount of time online debating the origins of SARS-CoV-2, mainly on Twitter, mainly on the phone. And we were all kind of lost until about 2021 when this American whistleblower who I outline in the book leaked this document written in 2018 by a white man named Ralph Barrick. And he is a professor of coronavirus research on the campus of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And in the book, I basically openly allege he created SARS-CoV-2 with intent. But it was an animal vaccine, so it was an accident. So it allows me to go on camera and talk about that accident relatively calmly, relatively coolly. But the accused know who I am. Dr. Fauci knows who I am. Ralph Barrick knows who I am. Vincent Munster, facing 5 years of a jail sentence for unrelated charges, knows who I am. I've asked them all repeatedly for alibis, and they won't provide them. The World Health Organization even knows who I am. So Jeffrey Sachs plucked me out of obscurity and put me in front of them it was a year ago. And I feel like I debated them, and I feel like I won. But you can read about that. I won't go too far into it on my Substack, Reverse Engineering the SARS-CoV-2. The origin of SARS-CoV-2.
Highly recommend the Substack. It's a great way to get bite-sized parts of it, and it's generally timeless too. It just tells the story in various ways a number of times.
That's awesome.
It's great. Yeah.
Did anybody have anything that they wanted to ask or something? Sorry, I thought Brandon looked like he wanted to.
Well, I always have things to ask, Nick. I think that's fantastic. So, I mean, to break right into it, to like the things that you were just talking about, is that the mainstream idea Well, what is mainstream anymore, I guess, is a good way to start this off with. Is the mainstream trying to still tell us it's some kind of bat virus that came from a wet market? And then from there, we get to the idea that maybe it was Fauci who created these things with his own organization, health organization in the States, and then they outsourced it to the Wuhan labs. And now it seems that you're going into it that there are these other characters that I've actually never heard of, even though I'm like as far down this COVID rabbit hole as can be. So if we could start there, that'd be fantastic, of like the different narratives to where you're going with this.
Right. So you touched on it well. The narrative is that Tony Fauci took some of your tax dollars and tossed it over the Pacific Ocean, and some Chinaman, or in this case, a China woman named Xi Jinping, the bat lady, messed up. And we won't get to the bottom of it because there's a Chinese lab behind a communist curtain, and the documents are there. They'd all be written in Mandarin, and we couldn't interpret it anyways. And so there's that. So the debate's over, and I'm saying not so quick. So the evidence there for a lab leak in Wuhan is strong. Don't get me wrong. The main evidence you all need to know about is the town Wuhan is not a random place on the planet. So, but it's not random because of, again, this guy I've already mentioned named Ralph Barrick. In 2018, he wrote a document, more or less, proposing to create SARS-CoV-2 to the U.S. military, to the Department of Defense, to DARPA, it was called. And in 2018, they solicited, this is 2018, it's called COVID-19 because it emerged a year later. But in 2018, DARPA, the Pentagon, solicited bids for the creation of something very similar to SARS-CoV-2. And this guy named Ralph Barrick on the campus of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, submitted a bid along with this guy named Peter Daszak. And y'all probably heard of Peter Daszak. He's the British EcoHealth Alliance guy who's supposedly the bag man between Wuhan and Tony Fauci, which is true. But he's more or less the money man for Ralph Barrick. He is the brains behind this team. So in 2018, they proposed that they would create something very similar to SARS-CoV-2. To be precise, Ralph Barrick said he would create something 25% different from SARS-1. Now, if you're old enough to remember SARS-1, it was from 20 years ago and it emerged from some wet market in Hong Kong. And he said SARS-2, or he said this chimera he was creating would be 25% different, and SARS-2 is 24.7% different. And so he's getting very precise with what he wants to do. He wanted to basically inoculate Chinese bats. Since SARS-1 came from bats, he wanted to vaccinate Chinese bats. That sounds crazy, and it is crazy. Don't get me wrong. But that's precisely what DARPA and the Department of Defense and the Pentagon wanted to do. Your other tax dollars are basically supporting these U.S. military bases up and down the Pacific Rim, all the way from Korea to Japan to Singapore. And SARS-1 was a big deal to them. They shut down all those military bases during that outbreak 20 years ago. And they said, we didn't want to stop that from happening ever again. And so now we know it is a dumb idea, but at the time it was a great idea. In 2018, we'll go out there and vaccinate the source where these nasty pathogens come from. And all viruses come from bats. Ebola, Marburg, MERS, SARS-1, SARS-2, we'll come into what kind of bat it came from. The big example here in America is rabies. You don't think about it, but rabies comes from bats. And the USDA flies choppers and planes overhead of America and drops little treats out the back to vaccinate the raccoons to prevent them from transmitting rabies to Fido the family dog. And the idea was to quit vaccinating the raccoons and just go vaccinate the bat where the rabies came from. And so all the virologists, all the scientists were doing this exact same thing. Peter Daszak, Ralph Barrick, the Pentagon, they're all talking about in 2018, and there's a lot of money in it because it's not easy to do, obviously. There's a lot of technical expertise involved in that. So real quick, and I'll quit my rant here because I don't go too far into the deep end, but when SARS-2 emerged in late 2019, early 2020, the U.S. government turned to Ralph Barrick, and they said, is it engineered? And he said, no, absolutely no evidence of engineering, because he engineered it. The guy that the U.S. government turned to, the expert in coronaviruses, who spent his whole life, researching them, playing with them, studying them, was the one that they turned to and asked if it engineered, and he was the one that engineered it.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. So the idea that all these things are coming from bats, and then if you could just vaccinate the bats themselves, that'll cure and make sure we don't get any of these things. How deep of that science do you think is real, of this idea that all of these things are coming from bats itself? Is that an actual line that's in the sand where it's the truth and then the rest of it is what gets shady, or what?
It's a little gray area, but to be, I guess, exact about it, they have these great little machines, they call them aluminum machines, PCR machines, where they can trace these pathogens back to the source. And bats are not birds; they're mammals like you and me, and they harbor that disease like no other. So if we inject Marburg into one of us, we're dead before the conversation ends. You inject it into the bat, it just kind of winks at you. And so the scientists and virologists were utterly obsessed with these bats, basically, and their ability to harbor pathogens that can kill us. So the idea was to go to the source of the outbreak. So we've all heard of Ebola outbreaks. That comes from bats, and that's in Africa. Well, guess what else is in Africa? U.S. troops. So the idea was to go out there and vaccinate the bats in Africa. And in order to vaccinate a bat, it ain't easy. It's a tiny little creature. You've probably never seen one. If you have, you don't want to be near it. And they're deep in those caves, and they're out yonder, and they come out at night, and they're nocturnal. And so the idea, I'm gonna get deep into the weeds here, but Tony Fauci was really deep into this. In 2014, he was asked more or less by his colleagues, "What are you working on?" And he goes, basically, more or less wildlife vaccination. The idea he was pushing it was to create what's called a self-spreading vaccine. It's essentially you inject the virus, we'll call it, into one animal, and then it spreads to the next one, which spreads to the next one, which spreads to the next one through air, through contagion. You are basically inoculating an entire wildlife species by just injecting the serum into one animal, and it now spreads autonomously to the next one. Doesn't that kind of sound like COVID? The way it just spread between us through air? That's precisely what COVID was. It was an animal vaccine. And I'm here to tell you, it doesn't just end over there in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. It also ends in Hamilton, Montana. That is Tony Fauci's Fort Detrick. It is his biodefense lab. It was his outpost. I mean, this is where COVID was aerosolized. This was where it was turned into an airborne agent. They took Ralph Barick's genome, they turned it into an airborne agent, and then they shipped it off. This is an accident, so we can talk about it, to Wuhan. Now, why is Wuhan a story? Because that's the place where everyone knows, because they had the bats. They had access to those bats. That little Chinese horseshoe bat where SARS-1 came from, they had it in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And, most of the time people want to point the finger at the bat lady, some Asian lady, some Asian man, some CCP guy, some PLA guy. No, I'm here to tell you the patient zero was a white woman. Her name's Danielle Anderson. So she was known as the last and only Westerner in Wuhan. And she left in November of 2019. And she had a cover story. She was working on Ebola. Well, I've looked at her resume. It's 100 pages long, and she's worked on everything except Ebola. She was basically on this top secret document that this Major Joseph Murphy leaked in 2021. And in this 2018 document is her name, Danielle Anderson, right next to Ralph Barick's name. So you got a woman in Wuhan in a 2018 document in a top secret folder right next to Ralph Barick, who said he would create SARS-CoV-2, and he would provide it. His technology is so advanced, he can basically ship these pathogens around the world. It fits in a 1 millimeter tube, it sits on dry ice, and it flies in a box underneath your feet on a plane. That's the way they use these things. They smuggle them, they trace them. It's called an MTA. It's pretty well legit material.
One of the players got picked up in the Detroit airport. Y'all may have called Vincent Munster, the well-named Vincent Munster, who was the character out at the Rocky Mountain lab, the government lab. He was bringing in monkeypox from Africa without reporting it, and then lied to the customs agents. And now, he's going to go to jail. And that's after the pandemic. That's after somebody we allege has knowledge of exactly what happened, and they're still so arrogant that they're flying around with things.
What about the most recent one, the Las Vegas guy with all the have you heard about that one? All the pathogens that he had? Like, what is that about? I don't want to off topic, but that seems, how common is this that people are just stacking up pathogens to spread, and how many people do that around the world?
More than we thought, more than we knew. This kind of brought everyone's attention to the forefront. Like, what are y'all guys up to? And they basically have, an illicit market. We'll call it a gray market. It's hard to regulate these people. It's hard to know what they're up to. Essentially, it's a pathogen. It's a virus. It's icky. It's an icky subject. But I don't know about the guy in Vegas. I knew about the lab, and I thought it was in L.A. That was kind of illicit. But they're all
if I could frame it a little bit in terms of who these people are. This guy Ralph Barick is not some rogue scientist. He's the #1 federal research grant recipient of the North Carolina University system, 16 campuses. And then Carolina is arguably the top public university in the United States. I went there. I love the school dearly. And this was their #1 grant recipient. And he has an entire ecosystem built around him. And they control, just as Wuhan did, a BSL 3, or is it 4? I've been calling it a 4, Jim. It is a 3. Okay, that's some of the most expensive real estate in the world, right? That's the bunny suits, the whole 9 yards. And he's also this Barrett character. He was not, I put it that 90% of the coronavirus, 85% of the coronavirus knowledge internationally was held at Carolina, another 5 or so over at Duke, or 10, and then the rest in Wuhan and Germany and stuff. I mean, this is a fairly narrow field, but it was a very lucrative field. And it had a huge institutional presence at the university, and they are conducting the most dangerous activity known to man. Just think about these pathogens. If you drop a nuclear bomb while you're wearing a bunny suit, you know, it may take out Orange County and, oh yeah, nobody can go over there for 1,000 years, really sucks and all that, but you're fine in New York, right? Except for maybe for a couple weeks. But you fuck up doing this and it's lights out for millions, if not billions. And how they tolerate that at Carolina, given their longstanding environmental concern about toxins and whatnot, but somehow this practice escapes normal attention, public attention, because they cover it up in public health, which I suppose it is. It's also the most dangerous thing a human can do. So when we talk about this Rocky Mountain lab, this guy at Carolina, all of them are surrounded by gigantic, well-funded superstructures of administration and institutional might. But it's only 6 people, right, Jim?
It's only 6, and they're not defending themselves. I want to make that clear. So don't defend a man that will not defend himself. That's the problem I'm having with others. Ralph Barrick is not defending himself. Jeffrey Sachs wrote the email, and we wrote an article basically accusing him of creating SARS-CoV-2. And we sent it to Ralph Barrick, this white man on the white campus who told the U.S. government wasn't engineered it. We engineered it. And we said, defend yourself. This is late last year, early this year. And he forwarded the email to UNC Communications, and then they forwarded it back to me, and they said, our response is our testimony. The U.S. government brought him into testimony reluctantly, and he talked. And in there, he kind of incriminated himself further if you get into the weeds. But in there, they said, that's our statement to him. So we asked him for an alibi. I've asked him for an alibi for several years now. He knows who I am, and he will not defend himself. This is a grown man, 72, 73, and the University of North Carolina is not defending him. They forced him into retirement, and he went kicking and screaming. And he's now lawyered up. He's got Bill Gates' lawyer. He's got, some money with him. So
yeah, they fired him and also have not commenced an investigation. And I might as well introduce now, Jim and I have started a website, or I've started a website with Jim's assistance, carolinaflu.com, ladies and gentlemen. I'd love for you to put that in your YouTube description, and we're seeking signatories to our open letter. And they've been ticking up lately. It's only been about 3 days, but we're about to get 100. And if you and your audience could share, consider signing the open letter and sharing it, we would deeply appreciate it, because this thing is so close to tipping. I find it in other fields, and some of them are pretty inscrutable, but we deal with all these mysteries. I just love mysteries, right? I think we all do, people on this thing. This ain't the Kennedy assassination, man. We can get to the bottom of it. Okay. And, I saw a Kennedy assassination expert. I forget the guy's name. It's generally acknowledged as the guy. And somebody asked him on YouTube once from the audience. He's up at the podium. And he said, Mr. So-and-so Kennedy assassination expert said, will we ever know who and how the president was killed? And he said, well, of course we know. We know right now. We just don't know which book, right? There are 1,000 books out there. Somebody got it right, but it's all so muddied now. And there's so many factions that you're not even going to reach consensus on the conspiracy side. But this is modern day. The internet does follow things. People were looking real close right away. And here's the book. Jim figured out what happened.
So pathogens,
and we can continue to treat it as a mystery, or we can ask some targeted questions to disprove his hypothesis, which is what Carolina Flu is all about. It's an open letter to the university's chancellor, Lee Roberts, to simply investigate this. And as an example of how just shameless this whole system is, he trotted out 3 weeks ago, to announce an investigation of the football general manager for like farting in the locker room or something. I mean, who the fuck cares? Right. But it just hits the TV cameras right away. But you can be accused for 6 years of killing 22 million people and locking 88 billion people in their homes for 2 years. And they ain't going to go poke around when their name's brought up in Senate hearings, and they're investigators interviewing people and subpoenaing people, at least from the Senate, and they ain't even walking him in to ask him some questions. So you can get to the bottom of it. If Carolina went and they had withheld 5,500 records and submitted to a U.S. right to know, God bless them, lawsuit, 4 years of suing them down here to get the emails, and they gave them 130,000, kept 5,000. Well, I bet you the 130,000 are like the Panera menu, you know, for the lab meeting and stuff. I mean, just the 5,500 is where the action is, and they covered up as a proprietary, might have proprietary secrets, like they fucking cured cancer or something, and the royalties will be denied the people of North Carolina. I mean, whatever. They're hiding the pig. And we're that close. That's what people don't understand. We're that close. So please sign that open letter. It's welcome to everybody, whether you went to Carolina, whether you're a scientist. This is a global, hopefully former mystery.
So, Jim, you were saying that they had 6 people working on this, and I find that very smart, a smart thing to do, because the less people you have, the less people are going to run their mouths. And I haven't had the chance to read your book yet, but are you leaning towards that they created this as a bioweapon and not necessarily, and just used the guise of vaccinating the wilderness and trying to get to the bottom of this as a smoke and mirror type of thing so that they can roll out their bioweapon?
So I like Fauci's term. It's called dual use research of concern, DIRC. When you reach this level of technology, you are very close to a bioweapon when you're creating a vaccine. It is almost one and the same in the grand scheme of things. So there really is no difference. I really like Fauci's term, dual use research of concern. He was so balls deep into this. He had an acronym for it, DIRC, because he knew what he was doing. When you reach this level of technology, there really is no difference between the bioweapon or the vaccine. They can be used the same way. So Ralph Barrett has written, the guy that created this thing, has written a pretty creepy paper on bioweapon research. You can go read it in there. And he basically has a creepy way of thinking that his technology is so advanced, so good, it can be used as a bioweapon in essence. So, but in this case, for me to be able to go on camera and write a book and not suffer repercussions from it, I have to basically tell you what it was, an animal vaccine, which could be used as a bioweapon. And there were only 6 people on it, more or less. Ralph Barrett, Vincent Munster, Tony Fauci, Daniel Anderson, Linfa Wong, and Peter Daszak, because it was just an R&D project, basically. It was an academic science fair experiment, so I really called it at the very end. But I don't get too long-winded here, Brad, but yes, I mean, you basically
that's what podcasts are all about.
That's what you are dealing with, people that can create a bioweapon. And if you want to call it that, I don't really have a problem with that. I just really like Fauci's term, dual use research of concern.
Yeah, because then it can encapsulate a lot of different things at once. And then it's also legally, it's not like you're going to tell people like, oh, this is going to help cure rabies and SARS 1 and 2. And it actually may kill millions of people. And then we're going to actually blame it on something else because we don't want you to know that we were involved with it,
Right. And there's no CCP or PLA or any of that nefarious stuff going on in Wuhan. It's a dork town. It's an academic town. There is none. Everyone's looked into it. And all those little stories you heard were basically Beijing scientists, which is at least 500 miles away from Wuhan. So Wuhan was basically an academic town where they invited in the white man, Ralph Barrett. He's in there in 2018 taking a picture with all of them and saying, we'll open our doors to our bat caves and our bat samples to you, Mr. Ralph Barrett, because you're the expert in coronaviruses. You're going to come in here and help us prevent the next SARS-like event. We're going to invite you in to participate in this. And I mean, it was an open door invite. And they the people like Ralph Barrett and Daniel Anderson were in there working on the bats and with their pathogens that we now know as SARS-CoV-2. So it was the Chinese, and Wuhan Institute of Virology, invited in the Western scientists to do this kind of research. So they're not like scot-free in the grand scheme of things. But, this thing was cooked up in U.S. labs in 2019. That's where all the evidence led, all the documents led.
I think it's more productive to set aside the bioweapon stuff. If you read this book, it's more mundane. It's more banal. And there's another side to it. And believe me, there's a reason a lot of powerful agencies, 3-letter agencies, pay a lot of attention to this stuff. Who knows how it can mutate amongst the bureaucracy and things be used and misused. But I don't think it was developed to infect people. It was developed to infect bats. And it had actually the same features.
But isn't that the dual use part of it? Is that when we say things like why they did it is when you get into the conspiracy theory part, but it's that.
Yeah, well, if you're running a nuclear reactor and you're making plutonium, you can say that's dual use too, right? But most of them are not being used for that purpose, right? It just means it can be used dangerously. And just to Brandon, just to be frank, it's not as effective force if people run down that, because I could have been there too. I'm that there on a lot of stuff that doesn't have answers, and you run to the most nefarious. But never forget, people are greedy for small dollars, right? And they have
Occam's razor.
They have lost a grant that was very important to them with DARPA, and all they were doing was trying to improve their chances. Stop me if I get anything wrong at all, Jim, but trying to improve their chances of winning another grant. And in order to do so, in order to improve their chances and strengthen their record, they needed to trial it in the actual bats that they intended to infect, ultimately, the Chinese horseshoe bats. Right. So 6 people were in one of them. Now, these are specialized people, for God's sakes. You had Danny Anderson, who actually is credentialed. Well, she was, I think it's important to put, the only Western resident we're aware of in the Wuhan lab. She lived there for 3 years, right, Jim?
Off and on.
I mean, yeah, she had a key card in a parking space kind of stuff.
So then my question is about the woman who is the, patient zero that you're talking about, that I guess I've never heard of. And so I'd like to hear about that, because then how does that get spread to supposedly a lot of people from patient zero?
Go ahead, Joe.
If you Google her name, Danielle Anderson, you'll find her in Bloomberg in 2021. If you Google her name harder, you'll find her as the Facebook fact checker in 2020. So if you went on to the Facebook in 2020 to debate Lab Leak, Danielle Anderson was the one that knocked you off from there.
Yeah,
so
Isn't that the damnedest thing I've ever heard? Get your brain around that. The alleged lab leaker.
She was the expert. She's working on coronaviruses in Wuhan. She's going to be the expert on whether you're full of shit or not. So
she was the expert on lab leak. She
knew and she's an Australian researcher. That's what I pulled up on Newsweek. Is that the lady?
Yes, she is. She is Australian. She went to Harvard University. She's international. She was over there in Vancouver as a drug testing agent at one point.
They never paid for their own damn first class flight once. They just zip around the fucking world on institutional money, swabbing bat butts. Actually, they don't even do it. The guy in the host country gives them the vial. They go to the conference, stay in a $600 room, and then take off for the next international city. I mean, it's
how do I know she's patient zero? Is a question, because I don't want to get into the slander. I got her boss, Linfa Wong, to admit to me he stepped down on January 10th of 2020. That's not a random date in the history of SARS-CoV-2. That's the date the scientists uploaded the genome to the database for everyone to see. And someone like him recognized it, something we were working on, the Wuhan Institute of Virology and the BSL-4, and he did the honorable thing. Danielle Anderson's boss stepped down as the director of the Duke's Emerging Infectious Disease Division. That sounds crazy, but Duke University from Durham has a biolab in Singapore, and they had a contractor in Wuhan. So this thing doesn't just involve the University of North Carolina. It also involves Duke University,
which is 7 miles away. Its COVID corridor is 15501. It ain't all basketball, buddy.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Here, Nick. This is so. Let's see if this is the correct. Pull this up. Is that her?
That's her. This is not her fault. This is why I can talk about her so openly. She's on the receiving end of a biobomb. If you want to go back to the bioweapon terminology, she's given this project, this serum in the mail, more or less the way they ship these things around, and she's told to test it. And all she had to do was to reach into a cage holding a bat inside this BSL-4 when you're in this giant spacesuit walking around. And she takes the bat out of the cage and she inoculates it. And she puts the bat back into the cage with the other cage mates. And she tests for transmission between the bats through air. Are they transmitting this, as we see the virus, as they see the vaccine, between them and their cage mates? Is this virus contagious? This thing was designed to be contagious with intent, with the purpose to spread to the bats. What happened in the process of doing this, it got out on her watch. Now, exactly how, we'll never know. She claims she was never sick, and I completely believe her because she's a healthy 40-year-old runner. She's kind of a world-class scientist in the grand scheme of things. But we can track her whereabouts because she was a runner. She had this app called Strava. That's the app where they all upload their whereabouts and their runnings and all this other stuff. So the U.S. government in Vegas, Brad, was actually tracking her by a contractor called Mace. And they basically tracked her cell phone as she moved around the world. And in 2018, she's in Kenya doing Duke research on camels for MERS, because MERS comes from camels. Then she goes over to Beijing and she does what's called CRISPR research on bats in a Beijing biolab. You see her phone go from Beijing to Wuhan in June of 2019. And when she enters into June 2019, she's editing this DARPA diffuse document we talked about with Peter Daszak. She sends him an email saying, I'm working on this as I go into the BSL-4. And she goes into the BSL-4 with her phone. Her phone goes into the BSL-4 from June of 2019 until October of 2019. Then the phones vacate the BSL-4 in Wuhan. There is no phone to be found, no person to be found in the Wuhan BSL-4 from October 1st, more or less, until November 30th. And she goes back in along with Lim Wang, whose cell phone has gone from Singapore to Wuhan, and they go into the BSL-4. They clean up the spill, we'll call it, and they leave Wuhan, and they left with a cover story that's not adding up, essentially. So then when I got her boss, Limfa, who came to Wuhan to pick her up in November, to admit to me, he stepped down on January 10th. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what happened. The pathogen got out on her watch. Now, again, it's not her fault. In the process of testing this thing, she was testing whether SARS-2 would transmit between the bats in China in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Again, you would take the bat out, inject SARS-2 into it, put it back into the cage, and see if it would spread to the next bat, to the next bat, to the next bat. And so when she was in the process of doing that, it got on her watch. It infected her. It got into her lungs. And she left the Wuhan BSL-4 probably without even realizing it one day that she was infected. And she just breathed on the person next to her in the bus, breathed on the person next to her in the subway, breathed on the person next to her in her dormitory. And it just started to spread like wildfire from there.
So then that also then would go back to the idea that this can be spread asymptomatically, where you don't need any symptoms whatsoever. And it can be, I mean, one person to spread to many people. That's it's fat.
That's a good question. It was designed to spread asymptomatically. That's a great question. That was a design feature, not a bug. That's the way Ralph Barrick designed it. Why? When you're creating a vaccine, you don't want
the bats to spread asymptomatically.
Yeah, you don't want to harm the subject that you're trying to vaccinate. So that was the tattletale sign that took us. A lot of people went down the bioweapon warpath, myself included.
Yeah.
Up until about August of 2021, I was looking at some guy in the PLA ranks, and he wasn't in Wuhan. He was in the North Korean border, because you had to leave Wuhan to find a military-grade scientist that could do something like this, aerosolize an agent and create something like SARS-2. And the thought was, well, it's transmitting asymptomatically. That means that's bioweapon research, or that's nefarious research. And then when Major Murphy, the American hero, chapter 7 of my book, leaked DARPA diffused grant, he said, it's a vaccine, an animal vaccine, because of immune evasion. That's the way virologists are so good at what they design and how they create it. They eventually want the virus to evade the immune system, to spread it asymptomatically, so it keeps spreading and shedding. The idea was to make this thing infectious, crank up the R naught so one person infects 5. But instead of one person infecting 5, it was one animal infects 5. Yeah. Instead of avoiding the human immune system, they're trying to avoid the animal immune system. This is where it gets a little icky, but bats aren't birds. They're mammals like you and me. And so if you're targeting the bat with the transmissible vaccine research, you could inadvertently have a spillover event in the Wuhan BSL-4, which is what happened. And then you inoculate a whole other species, us humans.
Yeah, fascinating. Nick, what do you got for us?
I did want to ask about that diffuse thing a little bit more.
Yeah, it's the key. If Major Murphy had not, and his people who surround him, they're good people involved in this, right? Never forget about the good side, because even in bureaucracies, they're good people. Thank God, or my business would have failed years ago. But Major Murphy took a look at this thing, and it was in an unclassified folder. He looked, they said, Jesus, oh my God, we were looking at funding exactly what was emerged in Wuhan. But it was misfiled, and technically he could release it without suffering any penalty. He wasn't even a whistleblower, right, Jim? I mean, he just took it out
there.
Alluded
to the fact that he had pushback later, but yeah, he's definitely the hero of this whole thing.
Yeah, but
the Edward Snowden, basically,
legally, he was able to do it. If we didn't have that document, and I remember I was eating lunch. Remember the restaurant I was in? I saw that thing. I said, "Oh God, they finally got the bottom of it," and it was Carolina, because I suspected it from literally week 1. And because you just type in coronavirus research and you can see where all the knowledge is. And but if he didn't even leak it, and if he hadn't made that public, we wouldn't know. And there were other people around him that assisted him, and in some senses encouraged him in a sense, or whatever. I don't know. They're good people out there, and I think there are a lot of them. And the more we talk about the truth, particularly people over at Carolina that need to come through. And we've just added a tip line to carolinaflu.org for people that may want to, share some private information. I guarantee you there are 9 of them that want to say something about it for every one that's telling them to shut the fuck up. because a lot of people know now, one way or another. They don't know exactly what happened, but they know their bosses are covering this up or having these emergency phone calls or had to burn that document. Or, I mean, there's a lot of that going on. Right, Jim? I mean, like even Fauci might not have known Danny Anderson was allegedly over there. Right. Actually, we do know she's
Yeah.
over
So
there.
Fauci's told it's engineered on Friday night, January 31st of 2020. Yeah. And an 80-year-old man was up until 3 a.m. covering his tracks. And a lot of people, myself included at the time, were, what's up with that? You know, I mean, are you covering your own ass or are you covering China's ass? Because either way, it doesn't look good. And it never made sense why an 80-year-old man's up until 3 a.m. on a Friday night in January 2020, before most of us even knew of a town named Wuhan. He was basically told it's engineered and he's covering his tracks. And the prevailing theory narrative was, pushed by the U.S. Congress, more or less, was that Fauci had funded research. He'd taken your tax dollars and pushed it over the Pacific, and that China messed up. And I'm here to tell you, it's biologically impossible for any Chinese scientist in the Wuhan Institute of Virology or any Chinese animal in the Wuhan wet market or anyone or anything in all of China to have created SARS-CoV-2. I want to emphasize the word biologically impossible. Impossible. How do I know? I'll go to my little ender here. So real quick. There's 5,000 mammals on the planet. We're one of them. And out of the 5,000 species on this planet, there's only 5 that COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2, efficiently transmits through. When I mean efficiently transmits through, it infects another one. So if you go out there and infect a raccoon dog in a Wuhan wet market, it doesn't infect another raccoon dog. If you go out there and infect the humanized mouse in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, it doesn't infect another humanized mouse. Well, guess what the first spillback event was that was a clue that we all miss? The mink in Europe, in Denmark, in the Netherlands. There was an outbreak of the mink basically getting COVID. Well, those are not European mink. They're not Chinese mink. They're American mink. And they're only really found in one place in time before the pandemic, Tony Fauci's Rocky Mountain lab. The next one was the American deer. Now, when COVID from Wuhan split into American deer, I'm like, what the hell's up with that? And guess where else you find them? Tony Fauci's Rocky Mountain lab. Guess what American scientists use American deer for? To model, develop, and create self-spreading vaccines. You go out there and you inoculate Bambi, and Bambi runs out there into the woods, and Bambi breathes on the next Bambi, which breathes on the next Bambi. In this case, they would target tuberculosis, TB. But in this case, that was a clue that we all missed that took me a little while to figure out. What the hell is code from Wuhan doing in American deer? It doesn't affect European deer. It doesn't affect Chinese deer. It only affects American deer. There's 3 others. The American deer mouse, it's this tiny little rat up and down the Rocky Mountains. Rocky Mountain Lab is where also you found them. Tony Fauci's BSL-4. The 5th one, the Syrian hamster, or the 4th one's the Syrian hamster. The 5th one is called the Egyptian fruit bat. That's how I know that this thing was cooked up by Vincent Munster in Tony Fauci's biodefense lab in Hamilton, Montana, along with Ralph Barrick. That the Egyptian fruit bat is the American lab rat for creating these things. You don't find Egyptian fruit bats in China. You only find them really in Western biolabs. And the Egyptian fruit bat it's not the Chinese bat, it's the Egyptian fruit bat, is found in Tony Fauci's biodefense lab in Hamilton, Montana, and in 2 other places that have released the results to me, one in Germany and the other one at the CDC in Atlanta. So
Jim, would you
kind of the kicker?
I've been telling that same story. I'm sorry. I got to learn more from Jim too. Would you consider those analogous, or would they be the reservoir host of, because you hear a lot about, we have not found the reservoir host.
Yeah, the reservoir host has been found. It's been found in Fauci's biodefense lab in Montana. That's the crazy thing.
By virtue of the 5 animals that the virus does what? Works best in? Is that a way to say it as a layman?
Transmits onward through. So
okay, sorry guys, but
so
hopefully
COVID
it's helping
affects
y'all.
everything. It infects your dog, it infects your cat, it
the
infects
things
fish.
It transmits best through are basically the lab rats of this business.
Right. So some scientist somewhere has trained the pathogen to transmit onwards. When you do that, you basically shove the virus down the animal's nose, and it sneezes onto the next animal, which then sneezes onto the next animal, and you're training the pathogen to become contagious. So I'm here to tell you, if there is some evil intent to this thing. SARS-2 was created with intent. It was aerosolized with intent. It was made transmissible with intent. I mean, that does sound like bioweapon research, however you want to look at it. But the idea was to inoculate animals, not humans. So it was an accident. So that's the only reason we can actually talk about it.
The whole world.
I know exactly who would. Bill Gates would. And this is why I wonder about this, is because of Event 201 happened not too much before all that, right? And so it's interesting to think that if these were all very coincidental situations where they already kind of pre-gamed, this idea, what if, because they do know that these viruses are being studied and researched, then obviously they're going to be like, well, what if some kind of crazy event would happen and we can capitalize on that event at the same time. And I truly understand that there's a difference between correlation and causation. It's just really interesting, the synchro-mystic event. This is an occult podcast too. So it's like this synchro-mystic events that happen that I personally, and this is Magus in the Media talking, and this idea that there are dark sorcerers out there in the world that understand how quickly these things can be used for exactly, what was the word, Jim, that you used about how it can be used for multiple reasons at once?
Dual use research of concern.
I love that. I'm going to try to take that. Dual use research of concern. And that seems like another very fancy way of saying we can put money into this thing, gain, as what George was saying, a very venture capitalist thing where it's all like, we don't want to lose our grants. We need to keep this money going in so I can continue to get my hookers and madams on the side as I'm like making sure I maintain my way of living this life and my prestige. And at the same time, obviously, there's these characters that are still being not bossed around, but they have higher level DARPA military industrial complex individuals that they then have to answer to at the same time. So that's the dual use. Personally, on my part, where then we can, because people are asking in the chat, what about the mRNA technology? You know, what about the Event 201 kind of things? And so it's a very interesting, I like this because it gives it a more grounding to it. And you have a lot of research that shows.
We're not letting Big Pharma off the hook, but you can't.
No, of course not.
It gets into kind of having a theory of everything. And usually when you have a theory of absolutely everything, you're wrong.
Well, it's not everything, George. It's not everything. It's just seeing, and it's
you want to get. Yeah,
and this is why I do it. And this is why I do it is because of it's a good way to show how events can line up in a way where, say, we want to capitalize on certain things to have a mass psychosis event, a black swan event, where then we can see exactly how you can round up massive amounts of people for the coming, like, Palantir is doing this for a reason. Oracle's doing this for a reason. You know, we're taking people's DNA at a drastic rate and then selling it off to these corporations so we can make better viruses to protect people. So I'm just I'm just saying, this is my theory.
Don't get me wrong. You don't let Big Pharma off the hook. This was the best damn thing that ever happened to them. And they were damn, cheering, all of them got that drunken party the night that the stuff got out. They knew exactly what was going to happen. They needed a vaccine out. They didn't give a shit whether it worked. They had, my God, after the pandemic breaks, all evil is released. Okay.
Right. No, I get that.
And that evil was prepared. It was ready as shit. It probably hoped there were lab leaks. I mean, and then one drops in their lap and they make $1 trillion. But when you get right down to it, it's not as cartoonish as, having when are we going to release it because we got to meet quarterly. We got the quarterly call next week. Let's release the virus.
I hear that.
Bill Gates did fund this research. He funded self-spreading vaccine research.
That's what I'm saying.
He there's two of his lieutenants in the back of my book who I queried and asked them to prove me wrong, along with 100 others. So every virologist in this debate knows who I am. Every scientist in this debate knows who I am. I've asked everyone to prove me wrong, and I simply proved myself right by those 5 animals we talked about already that are transmitting SARS-CoV-2. So Bill Gates was researching this and studying this and pushing this. And back to your mRNA thing, I don't quite get into it in the book, but the same guy that more or less created SARS-2, Ralph Barrick, is more or less the same guy that created the Moderna vaccine. So it's one of the same. He was doing research for both sides.
And I wanted to jump in here too, because
just real quick, the key people, they fear Jim more than they do Rand Paul. Seriously. So y'all
Fauci's scared shitless of me. I'm going to antagonize the guy to the end. And
I mean, I don't mean it shallow.
Pay him back for all of this.
Him on your podcast,
I have politely asked the man for an alibi. He will not defend himself. Let's not defend Fauci. Let's not defend Ralph Barrett. Let's not defend the other guy, Vincent Munster. These 3 people are guilty of sin, and they're not defending themselves.
Yeah, I agree.
So I wanted to backtrack a little bit and answer that question about the mRNA, because it's the oldest thing that they do is they create a problem and they already have the solution ready.
Problem, reaction, solution.
Exactly, right. And then so I also wanted to backtrack a little bit, Jim, because you were talking about how they were essentially going to all these labs and they were trying to see if they can get it to transfer from bat to bat. And my question is this, is because Kerry Mullis came out and he said that the PCR test is not to be used to detect anything that we were using it for. So how are they, and if it was asymptomatic, and that's how they created it, how in the fuck were they actually testing to see if this was transferring from bat to bat?
Great question.
Yeah.
Danielle Anderson's using an antibody test. So she's in there with needles and blood. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, but essentially, I don't believe she's using PCR between the bats. I believe she's using an antibody test because she's trying to see if the animal is producing antibodies against the virus that she's injecting into it. So she's using an antibody test. Blood drawn from the animal, put into an antibody test, is what she's using, assays that she's always working with. So in regards to the PCR guys and the no virus guys, I get it, because I was in the same boat too. You basically wanted the pandemic to go away, and you're tired of these people that wanted to, mandate the mask on you, mandate the vaccine inside of you, mandate the lockdown upon you. And I have complete sympathy for that. But if you just step back and relax and you realize this thing wasn't lethal because it was a vaccine, it had a 99.9% survival rate. But you have to admit to me, it had a 100% infection rate. The thing was just trained to transmit, trained to go through air. And unfortunately, you do have to use a PCR test to test for that. It's a great question. But essentially, my proof of that is when I get into the deep weeds of it, there are tests between deer in American labs where the deer are separated by plexiglass, and one deer infects the other deer by the air that goes over the plexiglass. So one has no antibodies, and the next one does have antibodies because it's infected it through air to the next one. So you don't just use a PCR test to prove an infection. They use antibody test, if that answers the question.
Yeah, you answered it perfectly. Thank you.
Nice. That reminds me of the tick thing with deer. So there's something with deers that they're very, very similar because they use deers to transmit Lyme's disease, across the entire country, which again, I would put under bioweapon. But I get why we don't want to go there, because we don't want to diminish the research that you've done that is very grounded and shows you've got a really nice timeline with this.
There's another book on Rocky Mountain Lab called Bitten, and it's about tick research and lab research on Lyme disease. So, This is the Fort Detrick of America, and it was Fauci's biodefense lab. He goes out there once a year he visited Rocky Mountain Lab. This is Hamilton, Montana. It's a beautiful country. I've never been there, but it's just northwest of Yellowstone National Park. And he goes out there once a year to go visit it, basically. He built it post 9/11. You remember all the anthrax, biodefense stuff going on, Iraq War II. Well, Fauci was, balls deep in that. But all this money came after 9/11 to what was going to be the Department of Defense, and Fauci got his hands on it and says, I'll take that biodefense money and I'll put it in my own purview, NIAID, NIAID. And with all that money, he built several BSL-4 labs. One's down here in Houston, in Galveston, called UTMB. There's another one in now Kansas. They're trying to open up, but there's such a bureaucracy they can't even open it. There's one in Boston. All these big labs are like in these big places, these big cities where these big scientists want to go. But out there in the middle of nowhere is Hamilton, Montana. And out there, basically, no one wants to go. So Fauci would have to staff this place with foreigners. And so when a lot of people come at me like, oh, America created the virus. No, a foreigner in an American lab created the virus. Vincent Munster, who was Ralph Barrick's colleague, a Dutchman, who basically is well known, at least now, because he's staring at a 5-year jail sentence, unrelated charges. I believe he was on a watch list because everything I said and written about him, it's kind of hard to avoid him, basically, if you were deep into this thing. But
Can you give us just a bit of the related? What is the unrelated charge?
Smuggling monkeypox back into America from Africa at the beginning of the year. So he very cleverly, he went out to Africa. They got an outbreak. I'm going to be a benevolent scientist. I'm going to show up on the scene and I'm going to give you all some PCR testing. Going back to you, does that thing work? But he didn't use it for the PCR test. He used the empty vials that he brought over there to smuggle back the monkeypox, and he concocted this cover story basically that it's just diagnostic tests. It's nothing to see here, Mr. Border Agent. And they basically give them credit. They separated him and his fellow traveler, and they said, "What's in there?" And their story didn't add up, and so they dug deeper into the weeds. They found out that the guy had basically smuggled it. So whenever you're moving a pathogen legitimately across a border, there's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of bureaucracy. It's a select agent, sometimes it's called, and FedEx won't even ship it. So you got to go World Courier. It gets expensive. You got to have like the liquid nitrogen to freeze it. All this other, bureaucratic nightmare comes into play. Or you can just smuggle the pathogen in your suitcase, which is what he did. And he got caught doing it. So yeah, the guy that created COVID is a Dutch man named Vincent Munster, who's staring at a 5-year jail sentence. He'll probably plea out and not, have to serve anything. But his days as a scientist are coming to an end for an unrelated charge. I call him basically like the Timothy McVeigh kind of situation. The U.S. government has the suspect in custody, but they don't even realize what he's done, which is blow up the world in the grand scheme of things. So trying to get the story out is kind of ridiculous, but in a way, it's kind of, fulfilling, I guess, in that regard.
Hey, Jim, speak a little. So he got arrested and Barrett got fired, right?
Yeah.
So there's kind of good news. And first of all, on him getting arrested, I would think that there's more to that. I don't think it was a particularly curious customs agent happened to discover this.
I think he's on a watch list. I thought it was like the virologist conspiracy was that he was on a watch list. And I believe he was, because they had Peter Daszak on a watch list. So, if you say something wrong, I'm probably on a watch list at this point. If you say something wrong and the U.S. government takes a close attention to you, they put you on a list and you get flagged. And I've been flagged before when I spent like 3 months abroad and came back. You just get flagged for looking at, kind of weird. Where were you? What are you up to? By flagged, they mean you go into secondary customs and they basically tear apart your suitcase and they look at everything, your underwear, your laptop, all of it.
Your monkeypox vial.
He went to secondary customs, and in there, give them credit, instead of, you can't have a drug sniffing dog for a pathogen. I mean, they went in there and the guy tried to bully his way through it. He's a bit of a bully. He tried to bully his way through it. It's still,
they're all arrogant as hell.
The border agent, there's nothing to see here. It's just a diagnostic test, but yeah. That's it.
Hey, Jim,
so real quick, if
Go ahead.
Fauci wants to staff this lab out there in Montana in the middle of friggin' nowhere, he can't get an American scientist to go do it. So what he would do, he would sponsor the visa of a world-class scientist. And then they would say, hey, you don't get to work in New York or Boston. You're going out there in Hamilton, Montana, this place that no one wants to visit, no one wants to hang out, unless you like to fly fish and all that kind of good stuff, essentially. So that's what they did. Fauci staffed this lab of his with these foreigners. And the other guy involves a German. So a lot of people get a little upset with me when I say, these things were created in American labs. They were, but by foreign scientists.
By foreign scientists, paid for by the United States government.
Yes, paid very well.
Speaking of which, Jim, why, if we're trying to protect personnel in the Pacific Theater, okay, SARS-1 made the bases sick, okay, right? And then we don't want another SARS-2, coming from civets or whatever to infect our personnel in the Pacific Theater. Well, our people in the Pacific Theater are mainly there because China is our adversary. Why would we bring China in to help inoculate bats in their country to keep our military from getting sick?
This is, it's the $1 million question or the $1 trillion question. My simple answer is that you're dealing with dorks, not spooks.
Yeah.
You're dealing with academics, not generals. You're dealing with people that are just they're so nerdy. It's almost hard to fathom what they are. I mean, they're in there playing with bats, essentially. They're not playing with bombs. There is a lot of overlap between the two. Don't get me wrong. But if you think about this thing from a nation state level, you're always going to be confused. That's why I like to think of it from a microscopic level and the 5 to 6 people that are involved in creating this thing. There is a white woman invited by China into their labs to help them preempt these next kind of spillover events that could occur in their own wet markets. It was seen as a good thing, a benevolent thing in their own mind, at least. So it was good intentions, bad outcome.
So the spread itself, are you saying it also came from Montana? Because I think I got sick in November 2019, like really horribly bad, and I didn't even know what it was. And so you think it just came from China, or do you think it was also started in the United States?
Yeah,
What do you
good
think
question.
about that?
It was tested in China, but it was developed in Rocky Mountain Lab. It's not easy to understand that, but just think about the needle, basically, that you would inject yourself with if you're taking a vaccine. Those needles are prepackaged and shipped around the world in this case, what they did. So what they did is they developed it in Rocky Mountain Lab, in Fauci's Biodefense Lab in Montana, that had those 5 animals that are only found in one place in time in Fauci's Biodefense Lab in Montana. Then they have access to pretty much everything, every wildlife animal you can find on the planet, except for this Chinese bat. So Fauci and company had to go to Wuhan to test this thing because it's the only place on the planet that had access to those Chinese bats, which was the source of SARS-1. Well, guess what happened after the outbreak? Fauci spent $100 million in COVID relief funds to build a Chinese bat breeding facility in
He's
Hamilton,
like,
Montana.
damn, man.
So instead
you
of Fauci having to go to Wuhan to test it, he can
So
now
bad.
test it in Hamilton, Montana, because they're going to kidnap the bat from China. They bring it all the way back to Montana, alive and well, and they put it in a cage, and then the bat is going to breed. And then they're going to breed these Chinese bats on U.S. soil now, is the idea. So they don't have to go to Wuhan to go test it in the future. So Fauci, after the pandemic, took some COVID relief funds and built this $100 million bat lab in Hamilton, Montana.
I think that's just a tell in a way. After you understand
It's a comedy of errors at that point. But yeah, that's what Fauci had them created. The Chinese bat lab has been built. Now we're in 2026. It's been built. It's a huge facility where you basically put a male and female into a cage and they breed, obviously, and they have an offspring. That's the holy grail of modern science. They want to have this virgin bat that they can play with, infect, and do whatever they want with. I mean, these bats were the new lab rat. They were the new monkey. Monkeys are expensive. They kick, they bite. They're just not even really feasible. And mice aren't really that good of a model either for humans. But bats are perfect. This guy Lim-Fo Wong, who was Daniel Anderson's boss, wanted to use bats to study cardiology, cancer. They live long. They're relatively small, so considering they live 20 to 30 years, it's just like an elephant lifetime essentially. And going back to what I said earlier, you can inject these bats with the pathogens, and the bats don't get sick. And so the idea was Big Pharma was going to use bats for their research. You'll find in the Moderna vaccine patent, that mRNA patent, it mentions bats.
It's all about the bats.
That is weird.
So after the outbreak and everything, we were in the middle of everything, they let him go ahead and create this lab of his for the bats. Please tell me it's decommissioned. It's not happening.
Oh, it's built and it is commissioned, and yeah, it's up and running. It took them several years to get it going, but yeah, all that COVID relief money also found its way back into the government and this Rocky Mountain lab of Fauci.
Just think of the irony is he's sitting there and going, damn,
I know.
Started that by pandemic because we had to borrow those bats. If we just had our own bats,
he was
and then he fires up $100 million to do his own bat lab
all the way to the bank on this
after
one.
He had released it because he had to use their bats. So he kind of like mitigated the problem for the future, but like didn't fess up.
I mean, Dr. Death. I mean, that's Dr. Fauci's name is Dr. Death. And it's as easy as stating everything that we know from the RFK Jr. book, which is fantastic. And I've read all the way through with all those cliff notes. And it's just one of those things that it's like from atrazine to Ethiopia to now, it's like, so that's my point that I'm getting across is that even though this may have not been created to spread to humans to create a massive outbreak, you also know his track record, and then to not use that as being like, well, if he didn't really care if it did spread to humans, and we realized exactly what we found out at the hearing that you were at, is that he made hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars from these things as it was happening. It almost doesn't matter that he didn't think that. He knows that there are possibilities of these things being spread, even if it's the smallest of chances. And so it's so aggravating that people's lives are put, like we are, as we know from MK Ultra, to any of these really fascinating experiments that our government does on us, DARPA, the OSS, now into the CIA. We are but guinea pigs to the greater agenda, which is the bottom line of making tons of money and enslaving the masses as fast as possible. So
he was laughing at us the entire time. He was laughing at Republican senators who were asking him the wrong questions the entire time. China. I mean, once COVID from Wuhan spilled into here in America, it was not that hard.
Crazy.
Sitting in this chair, I was up until about 2 a.m. one night, and all you got to do, you can all do it yourself out there. You just put in American Deer Biolab, and you'll see American Deer and Biolabs. And then you put American Deer Vaccine, and you're going to see what you talked about: tuberculosis, TB, and Lyme disease, and all that other stuff. Then you do American Deer Self-Spreading Vaccine. And then you're going to say, oh, shit. Well, there's a clue, isn't it? This thing is spreading like wildfire, and it's also spreading an American deer, not Chinese deer, not a European deer, American deer. And why, the virologist and everyone else in this debate couldn't quite understand that clue was beyond me. I still look back upon it. And there's really only one lab. There's one lab on the planet that has deer inside of it, Rocky Mountain Lab, and self-spreading vaccine research, Rocky Mountain
Lab.
And
there's no fucking deer in China.
They have red and roe deer in Europe. And they have Zika deer in China. COVID doesn't affect them. Real quick, it's a mutation inside the deer. We all heard about the ACE2 receptor basically. It's the key that unlocks the virus to see if it transmits onward. All you had to do was align the receptor binding domain of SARS-2 with the ACE2 receptor of the species, and it was a perfect alignment for the American deer. The European deer was like this, and the Asian deer was like this, but it was a perfect alignment for the American deer. And what that tells you is what was going on inside Rocky Mountain Lab. Someone like Vincent Munster, or his boss Heinz Feldman, the German, was basically inoculating the deer with this SARS-2 like pathogen, and they were going to see if they could get it to train and transmit through air efficiently, to move through air, to infect one another essentially. And they used the deer as a model to develop this thing. So that was the clue that pretty much everyone missed.
Right?
It was
they're
the
trying
ultimate
to
riddle.
get it to be more transmissible in those animals.
They wanted the R naught up there, George. They wanted infection. They wanted transmission. They wanted that R naught, that number, to be at least 3 or 4. They wanted one person to infect 3, but not one human, one animal to infect 3, one animal to infect 4.
But then they wouldn't know how it would actually transmit amongst the subject animal, which was the horseshoe bat, right?
That was the test that Danielle Anderson was doing in Wuhan, and obviously we've seen those results. We were part of.
So you had the lab tests, and it's the most, still to this day, most transmissible amongst the lab animals. Has anyone tested on horseshoe bats?
They have not published on horseshoe bats, which means it's not really working very well. Essentially, it's unpublished data. Well, the published results are us, more or less, to be honest with you. Yeah. But no one has published.
Little facts too, Dan. Tell about Danny Anderson trying to raise her own colony of horseshoe bats, because that shows this was a long-standing problem for them.
Yeah, it goes back, 10 years, for 12 years. Since 2012, they've been trying to create this, since 2002 or 3. And in Australia, her boss, Lim Fa Wong, was trying to create a Chinese bat lab. And he said, these things are insect-eating bats. You have to hand feed them worms. He calls it the puppet show. They're very hard to keep and breed in captivity. They're very high maintenance. They're very fragile. It doesn't really work.
Just one kind of bat.
The Chinese horseshoe bat was basically what they were trying to create. And he said, no, I'm not doing this ever again. And that was in 2003 or 4. And come 2019, there was one place on the planet that could keep these bats alive in captivity. Now, it wasn't a breeding colony. They would just go out there to the Chinese bat labs or the Chinese bat caves, grab a bat, like kidnap it literally, and bring it back to the bat lab and just keep it alive for about a week or 2 by feeding it handworms. And that was in Wuhan, essentially. So they had a live, what they call wild caught in the DARPA diffuse document. They said they would use wild caught Chinese bats to test this SARS-2 like pathogen in Wuhan. So that's what Wuhan had. It's the only reason Wuhan's a story. They had access to these bats, which are the holy grail of science research at the time.
So the greatest, like, the question I have then is, so if they are not bioweapons, but they can transmit to humans no matter what, so what is the overall? So they want to vaccinate the bats so they don't harm the military bases, but doesn't it ultimately transmit to the people as well? Like, what is because obviously, like, we got it. So, like, what is the plan there? Do they even have a plan? I don't understand.
They didn't have a plan. They had a kill switch.
Yeah.
But from what I can tell, they didn't really use it very well. They didn't develop it very well. The idea is to have a kill switch that prevents a jumping of species. So you would kind of mutate the virus to prevent it from, jumping into humans. And I've asked Ralph Barrick, did you have one, a kill switch? Did you even design one? And I'm not going to get too far into the weeds. Apparently he did, and it didn't work. But there is idea of a biological kill switch to try and prevent the animal vaccine from spreading in humans, and it just didn't work in this case. So the idea there is DARPA had in the what they call the RFQ, the request for quote, we need a kill switch. If you're going to go with this idea of a self-spreading vaccine, and it was new technology. They were trying it out, and the results failed. But yes, I guess to answer your question, there was an idea to put kill switch into these kind of things, but it just didn't work on this one.
Fascinating. So then my question is, I have 2, but I'm going to hit one first. Why not just come out with this information that you're coming out with if it's not actually damning the people? Really, it's just more it's not they're not doing it on purpose to kill people. No. So why not just say we fucked up and we got this lab in the States and this woman transmitted it on accident? I did. That's what I don't understand, actually, is what's the point of this running with this big story that they have instead of just using the actual story which you've uncovered? I don't understand.
It's the way cover-ups work, and it starts off small. When this thing got out, it's 2019, and none of us have heard of Wuhan. Right. When they covered it up actively, it was January, February of 2020, and we still don't know of a town named Wuhan at that point. So Ralph Barrick, real quick, was the one that covered it up. The guy that created it is the one that covered it up. He went in there and attacked any virologist that claimed it was engineered because he engineered it. He would basically force them to kowtow. He's a 70-year-old man who's been studying coronavirus his whole life.
Yeah.
He's an intimidating figure. And, he's also a psychopath from what people have told me. I've never met him, others have. So let's not feel sorry for him. I mean, he's a straight up psycho. But he would attack his fellow scientists that actually claimed this thing was engineered. And so he made them toe the company line. And why not come out with it? I mean, you're going to see the results as time goes on. The funding is going to dry up. This is the virology community will probably cease to exist once this story gets out. I can't imagine governments around the world funding virologists, because they're all going to paint them with a broad paintbrush. One of you set out to blow up the world and did it. So the rest of you are going to get defunded as far as we care. So that's mainly the reason. There's a ton of money in this. These people fly first class. They all make 6 figures, 7 figures sometimes. They live, they have the ivory tower corner office. They are the big.
They're all part of Yellowstone Club. That's in right outside of Bozeman at Big Sky. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know how bad this gets. Locally,
they've got Bill Gates money. I mean, that's how rich they are.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I'm here in North Carolina, and again, that's kind of my lane, is to try to bring some accountability, or at least actually just test the hypothesis with them. Barrick, it was already actively speculated, that the Barrick lab had something to do with it. Let's just leave it at that, right? In 2020. And ProPublica is actually ran as very strange that they did this, kind of a center-left thing, but they went out and investigated, one of the few, the only comprehensive investigation of the lab problems at Carolina, and found 22 incidents over 3 years, including 6 after COVID started, people getting bit by mice and stuff. Okay. And then in 2021, the newspaper here in Raleigh, the capital, made Ralph Barrick Tar Heel of the Year. And then the university gave him the highest award, the O. Max Gardner Award. So they feted the man. You talk about a good offense being a good defense, that somebody turned the switches on as soon as the fingers started going towards him. They turned up the PR. Somebody, I don't know who the fuck they is, but it's just the way it happened. Whether it was the hive mind reacting to the truth by covering him in roses, or whether it was the leadership of the university system going, get Ralph some awards, right? It's creepy, man. I mean, it is archetypal. He was made an absolute hero. And he was very frequent press, or contributed to the press enough, right, Jim? He was no Fauci, but he was involved. And then DARPA Diffuse comes out and he goes quiet.
Oh, right? Yeah. Nick asked this question. Can you talk about DARPA Diffuse? I don't really understand. Can you I need to know more about that, if somebody can break that down for me.
That's just real quick, and I want Jim to detail it. Think about 2 grant opportunities. One they lose, then they're tuning up for number 2. Take it away, Jim. DARPA, they lost.
So, DARPA, that sub-agency within the Pentagon, does crazy stuff like Agent Orange, machine guns, drone warfare, I guess now, all these other things, dual-use technology.
Create Facebook.
Create Palantir.
Create Palantir, create Google, allegedly.
Google.
I mean, all these things you have to be thankful or unthankful for. DARPA apparently has their
Jeff Bezos' grandfather was one of the creators of ARPA. So let's just put that out there. Go on. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, that is crazy.
Trump's uncle stole the Tesla docs.
Yep.
Hey, listen, I'm with you, Brandon. But on this case, you gotta, pull it back just a little bit, because it's not helpful. I don't mean that personally, but we have a lot of problems. People either run too far with lab leaks or don't go far enough on the U.S. There's a sweet spot where Jim is.
Yeah, I love that.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. All right, tell me about Diffuse.
So in 2018, they put out a tweet on this. Basically, they want to inoculate animals that are creating pathogens that are spilling over into their U.S. military bases. There's a 2018 tweet by DARPA in January, February, and March. There's 3 of them, really, basically soliciting bids. They call it a BAA or something like that. I call it an RFQ, request for quote. And essentially, they're going out to the academic world, not just the University of North Carolina, Australia, Europe. Everyone can bid on these things, essentially. And they got $40 million to do it. And it's called DARPA Preempt. That's the name of the project. We have $40 million for 5 teams. We're going to shovel millions of dollars at you. We can go out there and preempt the next spillover event. And so everyone and their mother came out of the woodworks in early 2018, and they started to put together bids. And Peter Daszak and Ralph Barrick and the Bat Lady Xizing Li and Linfa Wong put together one bid that cost $14 million. That's a lot of money, and theirs was quite expensive. But when they bid it in 2018, which was the idea that we're going to vaccinate Chinese bats against SARS-like pathogens, they said, we're going to do this with something called a fear and cleavage site. So I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but Ralph Barrick said he would insert this thing called a fear and cleavage site. If you're into the lab leak debate, you know what the biological tattletale is this thing called a fear and cleavage site. So in 2018, Ralph Barrick in English basically types up, I will insert a fear and cleavage site into a bat-like virus, very similar to SARS-2, and I will provide it to the Wuhan Institute of Virology for testing. Now, why did he insert that fear and cleavage site into SARS-2? He was trying to affect bats. So these mammalian bat cells also contain furin, just like human cells. So a lot of people kind of get freaked out by that. Why is that furin and cleavage site in there? It's a biological shortcut. He was being lazy, trying to create something that would work and infect and transmit. You put a furin and cleavage site in there. What is that? Think about drilling out the firing pin on a semi-automatic weapon and turning it into a fully automatic weapon. You have essentially weaponized the virus, but you're not weaponizing it to infect humans. You're weaponizing it to infect bats. So if you want to get $14 million from DARPA, you got to put the best and brightest on it, and you got to make this fucking thing work. And I'm going to make it work by putting a fear and cleavage site on that damn thing. We're going to grow those damn viruses in culture, and we're going to infect those damn bats in vivo. And it's going to work. I'm going to get the $14 million. Well, he lost because it cost $14 million. The way he bid it up, it was just so technical, so complicated, so expensive. They were going to go out there to the caves by hand and actually vaccinate the bats individually, more or less. But on the other side was Tony Fauci's lab. He was basically competing against Ralph Barrick at the University of North Carolina. And their technology was what we already talked about. Much cheaper, much easier, transmissible technology. Inject the animal with one dose, and it infects the next one, and infects the next one, and infects the next one. So Tony Fauci's biodefense lab in Montana won 2 of the 5 projects, essentially, with this transmissible vaccine research. He was kicking ass. Fauci was winning these DARPA projects in Hamilton, Montana, because he's got these foreign scientists working with these airborne agents. They can create a very cheap, effective vaccine. So DARPA said no to Ralph Barrick, and they said yes to Tony Fauci. Well, along comes 2019, and Fauci's got his own project. He calls it CREED. So essentially what Fauci has done now is he has taken the losers. Ralph Barrick, again, DARPA rejected their bid because it was too expensive. And he got the in bed with the winners, which is his own guys over there in Rocky Mountain Lab in Hamilton, Montana. And he's put them together in this CREED bid, essentially, which is $80 million. So the group of scientists that lost the first round got together in the second round. And it was that second round of funding that, the R&D project went sideways. And to answer your question, I guess, for DARPA, it's a diffused document that was found. It was unclassified. Remember I told you it was advertised on Twitter? Well, guess who moved it into a classified folder? DARPA in 2021. They said they moved it to share it with the Biden administration after the FOIAs were all done. I don't know if I believe that. You can if you want to. But DARPA took the unclassified project and it was unclassified, advertised on Twitter, sitting in a DARPA folder without classification, and they moved it into a top secret folder. And it was in the process of DARPA moving it from unclassified to classified that caught Major Murphy's attention. It was the movement of the files that caught his attention, and it was in that movement that he found it. And then he downloaded it. Took an ugly scan of it, by the way. You can read the document online now. It's out there for anyone to see. Just DARPA Diffuse. It's mainly on the Intercept. That's probably the best place to read it. And it's this little scan of 75 pages. And inside that scan,
the best place to read it's carolinaflu.org.
Carolinaflu.org. Murphy walked off the campus like Edward Snowden and basically leaked this thing to a group called Drastic, because they were the only ones with the balls to publish it. The Wall Street Journal wouldn't publish it. The New York Times wouldn't publish it. They're all ballless, basically, in the grand scheme of things. The mainstream news is completely worthless on this thing. This group called Drastic did. And then the Intercept finally followed them and published it themselves. And in there, in 2021, is Ralph Barrick more or less saying specifically, I will create SARS-2, like down to the genome, down to the nucleotide, down to the deviation from SARS-1. So real quick on that, Ralph Barrick said, I will create SARS-2 that'll be 25% different from SARS-1. SARS-2 is 24.7%. He says he will assemble it with 5 restriction sites. That's the scissors and the glue that are found inside these engineered genomes. Guess how many restriction sites are in SARS-2? 5. Guess who asked Ralph Barrick early in the pandemic, are there any restriction sites that suggest this thing's engineered? Ralph Barrick. And he said, no, I do not. And there's one other thing in there. Inside this DARPA Diffuse document, they said they would use Egyptian fruit bats as a surrogate to basically create this animal vaccine. Well, guess what the reservoir host for SARS-2 is? The Egyptian fruit bat. So it's the pre-confession to the crime of creating COVID-19, and it was written in 2018. And the only reason you're hearing it from me now is the media is just scared shitless. Every time they all know who I am.
No, it's
they all
so
use the
damn
same
bad.
word.
Jim and I have 2 op-eds pending back to my North Carolina lane. 2 op-eds pending at the biggest TV station and the biggest newspaper in the state capital. Neither of them have been acknowledged. This is sending in an article to the public opinion page or whatnot, web or real. And I've done a half dozen of those over the, get fired up about something, write an op-ed, send it to them. They might give you some changes. They acknowledge it. You go back and forth. I've never had one not printed, but I would imagine some people, they say, we're just not interested, blah, blah, blah. Nothing. These are the 2 major news organizations in the state capital, and they can't even acknowledge it. And this is a well-written, even-handed, evidence-based request that the state's premier institution just answer some questions and investigate this.
Mockingbird Media can't answer questions because they're owned by the DARPA and the CIA, and so it goes back to, it's like, it may sound like conspiracy, but I there's something here, and the reason I want to bring this up is this next question is what the hell? So I was in Indonesia in early 2020. I was in Bali, where there's a direct flight from Wuhan in there, and like 200 some small Wuhan Chinese people fly in all the time. The main point of this is that my X account, or Twitter at that time, was getting all kinds of videos from Wuhan and from China of people. And what I come to find out is most likely like all made up, is that people were dying in the streets at that time frame. And so my question, and this is obviously theory, because this is not something you probably wrote in your book, but like, what is that about? Is that how good DARPA and the military industrial complex are at covering up
in the book?
What do you mean, Brandon?
I think I know what it was. It was drunks in the streets passed out, and the kids were coming by and doing videotape of that, and they would upload it to their social media. Weibo or Wabu or whatever it is, I can never pronounce it. There's a Twitter in China, and that's essentially where it went. It went viral from there. It was basically just drunks, like any big city. Wuhan has them, and they were just passed out, shit faced in the grand scheme of things. So that's what we saw. It was just amplified because of the pandemic. Don't get me wrong. When the pandemic started, this thing was a bat vaccine. It was attenuated, weakened for a bat's immune system, which is a lot stronger than our human immune system. So it was a killer out of the box. But as it moved around and transmitted around, it attenuated itself and kind of weakened over time. But yeah, it was a bit of a killer out of the box. And I do believe that was just drunks in the street, basically. They were being videotaped. I don't have a definitive answer. That's the best answer I've come across.
What was the gain from trying to pin it on China? Because they had a pretty good propaganda thing going. Like even Donald Trump, every chance that he had, China, it came from China.
So yeah, Donald Trump's first administration helped create this thing. If you go into Donald Trump's 2018 biodefense plan, every president points out one. In 2018, guess what the first pathogen is in their biodefense plan? It's like 70 pages itself. It's SARS. SARS-1 is the first pathogen in Donald Trump's 2018 biodefense plan. This thing was always on their mind for the reasons you just talked about. China. They were so obsessed with SARS from China that they wanted to go out there and vaccinate bats against SARS-like disease and created SARS-2 in the process. And I guess to bring it back, why is it still being covered up? Well, it's pretty obvious now. The U.S. government doesn't want to admit liability for this thing. So what can happen there. God knows what can happen there in the grand scheme of things. So it's kind of just a, shovel it up and don't care about it. But the people investigating this, are suffering from what I call a Stanley Milgram experiment. That's when the white guy in the white lab coat kind of stands over you and says, push the button and shock your colleague. And 3/4 of the people on the planet, or at least in this experiment, did it. They took the experiment to max voltage. So essentially, Ralph Barrick is Stanley Milgram, this guy in the white lab coat, staring over everybody from this.
Milgram's been debunked.
And that's basically what's happening right now. We have a theological problem with the people investigating this. They have a very hard issue with the idea that a white man in a white lab coat created this thing and then also covered it up. And to me, I think that makes it one of the greatest stories of all time. To everyone else, they're utterly appalled by it. And George is now being pulled into my world and realizing how few people want to get on board with this accusation, which is based up with, we have a pre-confession of crime.
The damn lab leak people on Twitter won't sign the petition or even acknowledge it.
They're scared of this guy.
Open letter.
When they talk about him, they talk about him as if he's a hero. They actually think the guy's like some sort of, angel. It's theological, in my opinion. But the way I just want to phrase it as a Stanley Milgram experiment with both, not just random people on Twitter. Let's not pick on them. I'm talking about like members of the U.S. government that are investigating this thing. They look up to this guy for whatever weird reason. And, basically it's their own Stanley Milgram experiment. And he just kind of towers over people and just kind of intimidates them. He's a bully. People that have met him called him the same thing, over and over and over again. I think he's going to go down as the most infamous scientist in the history of humanity. Because not only that, if, he withheld the antidote, he could have extinguished the pandemic very early on in this thing. He could have put the lights out on this thing. All he had to do, it's not too complicated. But the reason I know the Bat Lady didn't create this thing, she uses something called vero cells. They're called monkey cells, basically, that you passage the virus through to make sure, it can grow. But if you grow this thing in vero cells, the Bat Lady cells, the Chinese cells, it deletes the fear and cleavage site, this thing I talked about. But if you passage it in Ralph Barrick's cells called human epithelial, it preserves, it keeps the fear and cleavage site. So it was biologically impossible for the Bat Lady in Wuhan to have created this thing. Well, Ralph Barrick could have advised every lab on the planet to passage the virus on these vero cells, removing the fear and cleavage site, taking it from this fully bioweapon form, transmissible bat vaccine, and attenuating it into a nice, safe human vaccine. When I got my brain around that, I decided to go after Ralph Barrick pretty hard. Ralph Barrick withheld the antidote, more or less, to this thing. He could have extinguished the pandemic very early on by putting the firing pin back into the virus. So if you insert the fear and cleavage site to weaponize the virus, you can take it back out to de-weaponize it. And Ralph Barrick withheld that antidote. He could have de-weaponized the virus pretty quickly.
Yeah, and then what you do is
well, no, and that's why it does feel like a psychological experiment, because if you look at what it did to like just our country alone, like how many people it's like separated and how many people like separated from their family because and said that their family should die if they're not, you know what I mean? Like so many people said so many nasty things and we're just all like, okay, that's what you think about me. That's great. So it was like a psychological experiment. And that's where I'm like, how did they just amp that up then? Once they found it was like a leak, they're like, let's just go full force, amp it up. Let's make it like a psychological experiment. Let's make it everything. Like it's kind of wild how it amped.
Never let a crisis go to waste.
There you go. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, that was it right there.
They are all rolling in dough. I mean, Ralph Barrick's got a brand new $100 million lab being built with his name on it until he got fired.
Yes, these people live by the phrase, like, when there's blood in the streets, that's when you can profit, even if the blood is your own. So it's profit over everything, and I also wouldn't put it past, like, they're dark occultists and they want us, I know this isn't a conspiracy show, but there's dark occultists at the highest of the highest positions, and they really don't like people.
Yeah, I call that shit floats to the top. You kind of find two kinds of leaders, leaders and shit.
Yeah.
And
Well, and the idea is that if you're in high weights of government, presidents, and all these people, you are a psycho. Like you can't be in those positions without being a psycho.
Now then, man, I used to work in the U.S. Senate. There are plenty of fine people in
Senate's
Washington.
one thing. Well, that's fine. Yeah. That's fine. But Senate's one thing.
Bureaucracies. Think in terms of bureaucracies,
particularly
if you're not an appointee. But the people who rise up over 30 years through those systems, now there are plenty of good exceptions. As I said earlier, there's some good bureaucrats out there. The system we'd have already had another true revolution. But I think they begat evil. When you have a group of more than 50 people together and there's nobody there that can fire them, you're in trouble.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And these bureaucracies, it's so mundane. I don't think people, and you guys, I appreciate you nodding because you've realized that. I think anybody that does a lot of thinking about it does that. In corporate bureaucracies, they exist too, but at least somebody can go fire them, right? And the incentives become so perverse when you can't be removed for your job that it just creates people that are low quality. First of all, the assholes don't get fired. The jerks don't get fired. The bad apples in the bucket don't get fired. Some of them float to the top like shit, and that's what Dr. Fauci is. He's the embodiment of the evil that is born from unmitigated bureaucracy.
So with all of the stuff that you've uncovered and basically have been putting it in these people's face, are we expecting to see any kind of accountability? like the Nuremberg trials, anything like this?
I don't think so. Not from an official level, but maybe from a lower level. Like a state level or a local level. The city of Hamilton, Montana, has a city council meeting every month, and they did more of a trial in Rocky Mountain Lab than the U.S. government ever will.
No.
So I think if this does happen, it happens from the bottom up, like this. Where you basically
CarolinaFlu.org.
like George, basically, sable rattling over there in Chapel Hill. It's a mind-to-mind, many-to-many thing. The problem was we needed somebody to go on camera and tell us what happened and accuse somebody of doing this, and that accused would not defend themselves, which is what's happening right now. So the ball is starting to roll. But yeah, the U.S. government's going to cover this up harder than China at this point. I hate to use the word U.S. government because what is it? It's just this cabal of people. Not really. It's just, is it really in your self-interest to dig up, dirt on your own, scientist in the grand scheme of things? No. And it's a bit of a prisoner's dilemma in that regard. So I don't expect a Nuremberg trial. That would be nice. Don't get me wrong. I do. I'll be honest with this. I don't know how vocal I can be. I do think Ralph Barrett needs to kind of self-exit the earth. I genuinely do believe that. There's once I learned he withheld the antidote, I was kind of like, I think that's enough for you.
Go through that.
That's crazy that he withheld that. To think that because like remdesivir, right? Instead, we put people on remdesivir, which has this nickname, death is near. Of course it is.
Yeah.
And then the iron lungs once you're on an iron lung, you die. Basically, it's like what the hell, like.
That would be the honorable thing.
Really close, guys. Don't get that. That like I said, think of a public institution that has this much attention to it. If you accept the premise that Carolina can prove or disprove our hypothesis, how far are we from them having to prove or disprove it given the evidence? Not that far, man. How many more times does Carolina have to come up associated with this before people start telling them, the trustees, the board of governors, the legislature start asking them so many questions that they can't answer them privately without saying we're going to commence an investigation, which is what you always do in these things. And generally investigations,
they won't investigate it.
What's the incentive? Investigations are meant to cover things up, but this thing is so fucking self-evident that you almost couldn't investigate it. You couldn't. You would have to have a self-evident lie in the investigation report.
Yeah, but George, Epstein didn't kill himself, and you all know it. So none of it really matters because of we can't even get people thrown in jail for the whole Epstein thing, which we know is true, let alone now this other thing, so it's like, it's so fascinating. I think it takes multiple. Okay, this is what I learned in health. I've learned that there's no such thing as a silver bullet. And that silver bullet is, we all think maybe one, this thing will help if but actually we need a strong front on all sides. And that's why I think this is really important. It's like, we need to talk about Epstein. We need to talk about COVID.
Taking them down.
That's what I'm saying.
That you have some optimism,
of course,
because you're definitely jaded and cynical, and it's good to be jaded and cynical. But I try to mix that with some optimism, or just fucking hang it up. Don't get out of bed in the morning if you think like we do.
Well, I can't smile like I do without optimism, my friend.
Yeah, but good on you, Brandon. I can see you mix it up right. Because the light here needs to be focused. You're not going to get Dr. Anthony Fauci answering questions and fessing up. And when people talk Nuremberg trials, I get that. But all we're doing is we're asking them some fucking questions, man.
Yeah.
I mean, just a briefing. That's all it takes. And on a state level, that's not out of the question.
I think this is, I want to add this term to everyone's lexicon, and a few of us already have it. And the term is called an egregore. And I think it's a really important term for this whole discussion, because what we're talking about when we're talking about the bureaucracy, the term bureaucracy itself is almost meaningless without the understanding that behind the bureaucracy is an egregore, an autonomous entity that has this power and force behind it, that no matter who enters into it can be taken over by that power and force. And so the idea that I'm getting at is we need to have our own egregore, our own force behind us that comes at it from multiple angles. This angle that you two are coming at is brilliant and genius because it grounds these things in actual time frame and an actual place where we can pick it up and hold it and say, I mean, look at your book was brilliant. Everything you just said is like, okay, now we have a map. And if we don't have a map, we have nowhere to launch forward to. Again, yes, COVID-19 mystery solved. Because the idea is if we continue to waver in exactly all these different conspiracy theories, which is really great to have them, but now if we can ground this into your work, Jim, and then from there, we can see how this corruption and fraud it takes place not only within COVID, but within Epstein, not only with Epstein, but within Big
Think how it
Pharma.
would shock
And
the
it
middle.
just keeps going.
The non-conspiratorial middle, the soccer moms that had their entire lives disrupted. I mean, there is an issue here that it can tip it and say, look, we were all lied to. It's beyond belief. And I think 79% of human beings have presented the accurate information. would at least 30% of those are going to learn something that we're being lied to.
It's the way the Nuremberg trial probably started. One person talks, then two people talk, then four people talk. So I mean, ideally there would be one. And I do kind of like, there's a whole nother, not to be, nice to these people, but there was someone else by Alex Berenson. His idea was to give them immunity so they talk.
Interesting.
Better for UFOs.
But they pardoned Fauci and he's not talking. So it's like,
good point.
It's a tough.
The idea was to give them immunity, and you have to talk about what happened and explain in detail, so we never do that ever again.
And that's in the contract.
It's a much more civilized option. It's the way out of the prisoner's dilemma. They're in a prisoner's dilemma right now.
Yeah.
That's a great idea, actually, because they're not going to get held accountable anyway. So why don't we just go ahead and say, you're not going to get in trouble. Just go ahead and tell us what happened. Yeah. So do you think that Barrett was instructed to withhold the remedy?
Great question. I don't think so. I think he's just so embarrassed and so full of himself. He wasn't going to give it up. But he listens to what I say. And he's give the U.S. government credit. They asked him to testify twice. The first time he testified, it didn't go well. The second time he testified, you can go read it. The U.S. government's published both transcripts. In the second testimony, he responded to me. And he claimed the fear and cleavage site attenuated the virus. And that's bullshit. The thing weaponized the virus. So he tried to respond to me. This has really hurt him. What I've done is actually, I think once this happened, UNC said, we're done with you. If this is true that you withheld the antidote, we're done with you, Ralph. And they kicked him out. But he's now trying to defend himself that didn't withhold the antidote. I wish I would have put it in the damn book. But when I finished the book, I turned to my editor. I go, he withheld the antidote. And her eyes lit like
firing your number one researcher who's just been disbarred.
Well, it only dawned on me after I finished the book, but I can't get into the guy's mind, so I don't know the answer. But he did withhold it, and he didn't know it. So he could have de-weaponized the virus and put out the pandemic very early on by removing that thing we call the fear and cleavage site. And so real quick, your viewers don't even need to buy the book. You just got to flip it over to the back cover. And so the front cover has this thing called RATG13 on the top, and it has SARS-2 on the bottom. And so when the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the Chinese scientists, published this, it lined up with this, SARS-2, 100%. It wraps around to the back cover until you get to the very back in the middle. There's a gap. You see the gap right there? That's RATG13 on the top, and that's SARS-2 on the bottom. Well, guess what the gap is? The fear and cleavage site, what we talked about.
And then,
this amino acid sequence. It's the only reason we talked about this thing as a pandemic, because it's been weaponized, per se, to infect bats, not humans, but in the spillover event, it kind of into us.
People glaze over with the science.
Ralph Barrett could have advised labs worldwide to remove this fear and cleavage site by passing the virus on vero cells. It would have removed this thing and gone back to this, and it would have been inert. It would have made a great vaccine for anyone that wanted it. And that's what happened. He withheld the antidote on that. So that's before you even have to read the book. I can show you it's engineered, because there's a match. You see the match, how it goes along, A, B, 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 C, C. It's an amino acid match. But then you get to the middle, you're like, well, what the fuck is that? That's the fear and cleavage site. The only reason we talk about that pandemic virus is because of that gap right in the middle. And when the Wuhan Institute of Virology, this is how I also know the Chinese didn't do it. When they gave up the natural sequence that made SARS-2 look unnatural, it was given up by the bat lady, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, Xi Zhengli. I think she may go down as one of the bravest women in history. She stood down the Western scientific enterprise, put her cards on the table like she's in Vegas, and she said, here they are. And that's what it was on the top. And when she published it, she sent out a bat signal to all the other virologists, like Christian Anderson over there in the Scripps Institute, who wrote the infamous email to Dr. Fauci, we find the genome inconsistent with expectations from evolutionary theory. And at the bottom, you can see Fauci, it's backwards because of the damn camera. I see it. So that's what Fauci said on January 31st of 2020. And he's up until 3 a.m. covering his tracks. So it was the Chinese scientist that actually published a piece of evidence that made Ralph Barrick's genome look engineered. And when Xi Zhengli, the bat lady, the hero, chapter 13, I think it is, published it. Ralph Barrick wanted her arrested. The white man in the white lab coat on campus of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, wanted the bat lady in Wuhan arrested for giving up the sequence because they had shared it beforehand. She had shared it with them like she had with other sequences. She basically just uploads it to an NIH database. He downloads it, recreates the virus in his own lab. He can do that. Ralph Barrick's so old and fat, he doesn't have to go out there to the Chinese labs to collect the bat samples from the bats. He just has the bat lady go. And that's the money Fauci was sending to Wuhan. The money that they all talked about going to Wuhan was for the bat lady to go out there and do recon work for Ralph Barrick and to collect samples like RATG13. And she did just that. And she uploaded it to the NIH database in 2018. So they're balls deep into this. And when she republished it in January of 2020, she basically exposed Ralph Barrick's fear and cleavage site. The same fear and cleavage site he proposed in the DARPA Diffuse document to introduce. I will introduce this fear and cleavage site into a sample like RATG13, and I'll provide it back to the bat lady for testing on the samples and the one on the bats and the one in virology.
So crazy because I just had a flashback of like Birx and Fauci and Trump and Daley coming out saying like 18 days to stop the spread and whatever it was. As then you're telling me that the whole time they had that exact thing that could do to cure everything.
That really rocks people's boats. They really, kind of rips the whole mask off this charade. But yeah, Ralph Barrick had it. I've emailed Birx, and she knows about the theory too. And I've asked everyone on the planet involved in this to prove me wrong, and they can't, they won't, they never will. It's not because I'm smart, it's because I'm right. But we have a pre-confession of the crime. And yeah, Ralph Barrick, this is really going to probably take him down. He would tell the antidote. It really resonated with y'all. I've never seen an audience quite do it that way, but that really pisses people off, obviously. It pissed me off.
Yeah, of course.
Things. If it doesn't piss you off, you're not alive.
Infuriating crime against humanity over a lifetime.
Yeah.
Because then it makes you wonder. Like who's behind him or why he did it, because then it makes him suspicious. Like if he wasn't trying to hurt anybody or if it wasn't intentional, like that's what makes him look suspicious. He could have been a hero.
Right.
When you start a cover up, you can't then change your mind. Mm-hmm. You make those first steps. After you've made first steps and do not fess up, the moment you see that genome, it's over, man. And then you're living a life of hell, and so, I'd almost rather be in prison. At least it's over, right? The walls are closing in over there. Who knows? There ain't no door. There is no door. And how close is it? Hard to tell, but there's no escaping this thing. But it's just a crazy thing that it takes one person out of 8 billion, Jim Haslam. Somebody's going to stay up 16 damn hours a day that's got the right mix of skills across multiple domains and then be an absolutely indefatigable character that cannot be tired by this task he has been given. And one person pops up and figures it out, and that guy's right here. Thank you for putting him on.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, I agree. And
thanks, Jim.
Yeah, this is great work, Jim. And it's fascinating because it's, again, this term that Lord Dobbsworth put up there, emergency use authorization, which is then why we couldn't use ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, interesting enough. And so it's not just one thing that happened, then it's another, and then it's like what you're talking about, George. It's like we can't go back on it, and we just snowballed ourselves forward into
we make a bunch of money and be Tar Heel
billions of dollars for fucking pharmaceutical companies. And then not even that, you get mass psychosis amongst the entire masses where now you've broken apart the family home where we can, so it's like, even if it's not meant to happen, this is the effects of this fucking madhouse that we all live in.
Yeah, it's like a virus even.
Was strange.
And knowing that you could have stopped it way early on, that's just, to me, is inhumane. It's a human being would not do that to other human beings, and how that man can sleep at night is beyond me.
I've never met him, but those that have may more or less say the same thing. He's a psychopath.
Yeah, we heard some interesting things in DC.
They wouldn't even let us publish it. The story we told or heard, it was he doesn't have any sympathy for this guy.
Really,
I did in the book. If you go through it, I kind of have sympathy for him. He's a father of 4. He's a kind of a stand-up guy. He seems to be on the up and up. Everything he did was relatively safe. It's a lot more involved in it though when he sends genomes to the Rocky Mountain Lab to get aerosolized. But since I published the book, I've since heard people talk about him both professionally and casually. That no, he's not all there. He's the type that thought the Earth was too populated anyways.
Eugenicists, exactly. Yeah. Woo! What do you got for us, Nick?
I think I don't know. Has anybody got anything else? I think that's already.
I had a question. Well, I want justice and I want them to be held accountable, but is precautions being put in place to prevent this from happening again?
No, that's the big fight I'm having with my fellow lab leakers. They think they can regulate these people. I do not believe you can regulate them. They are too smart, too driven, too in the weeds for any dork to regulate them in DC. And they're deep into a biolab in Rocky Mount Lab or Wuhan, China, or wherever the heck they may be. My idea, my thought is that you identify the culprits. And when you identify the culprits, everything falls into place. Defunding mainly, and just complete, annihilation of these BSL-4 labs and probably the BSL-3 labs. But they're still doing it.
Well,
they're still working on transmissible
gain-of-function
vaccine research. To answer your great question,
Yeah.
Princeton University was the latest one that published a self-spreading vaccine paper. And I got to pull out their names, pull out their emails. I got to email each one of them. You're playing with fire. You're a friggin' idiot. That's what SARS-2 was, and here's why. And they usually shut up and they move on. But you got to do it for each one of them individually. I'm having to do it myself. So yes, they're still doing this risky research as we speak. Transmissible vaccine research, gain of function as it's typically called. So it's not ending because people aren't having an adult conversation about who created this first pandemic. They're trying to obscure the white man's role in this, and for lack of a better word, and he's going to get away with it because of that.
But now they're doing it in our backyard.
Yeah, that's they're still doing it, and they're going to continue. There's big money in this, and these people are very confrontational, very pugnacious. You can see the way they talk about each other and the way they talk to others. It's just they are they're the scientists of science. They're called virologists. They study viruses, and it's a very niche science, and it's very hard to infiltrate. But I had to turn myself into an amateur bat virologist to get to the bottom of this. I had to kind of I became the seventh member of the team, if you will. I had to step deep into their shoes and become one of them in order to figure out what the hell they were doing in there. It's not easy to comprehend what the fuck was going on inside that Wuhan BSL-4. And it just led to this giant can opener. So ideally, if we get the story out, the chips will fall into place, and these people will kind of be debarred and defunded. That's the way I see it. You cannot regulate them, though. That's my opinion, because they were regulated. There was an Obama gain of function moratorium in 2014. It didn't have teeth. They turned it back on during a Christmas break when everyone was leaving DC in 2017. You could get another moratorium put in place. It'll last until maybe 2027, 2028. They're too driven. There's too much money in this. $14 million, was what they were offered, or what they offered to create SARS-2. And the U.S. government was willing to pay for it. I mean, think about that. I would probably weaponize SARS-2 for $14 million. That's a lot of money for what? 7 scientists? That's $2 million each. It's incredible how much money was in this.
Yeah, I mean, they're not pocketing it, but they're just building an institutional superstructure around themselves, which is just
incredible how much money there is in biodefense. It's more or less, the DARPA and the U.S. military has become like a jobs program for these PhDs, and they they fund each other through these grants and applications and whatnot. So, yeah.
I went up to a secret DARPA lab once.
Really?
I gotta tell you that story once, Jim. Aberdeen Proving Grounds. It's pretty damn cool. It's like walking around James Bond thing.
You better watch out, George. People are going to start thinking you're in on it.
No. I'm just a Forrest Gump of this shit, man. I ain't going anywhere. I got more time on my hands than ever.
That's funny. That's funny.
Did you get to see some real life Inspector Gadget stuff?
Actually, yeah. They were like little teams working on stuff in the lab and stuff. I mean, it was one of many, but it was a main one, and it took forever to get in, and you had to leave your phone and all this shit. It was a separate project. Cold fusion.
Did anybody have any questions? I'm pretty good with the way it went. Just wrapping it up now.
Thank you, guys. If you've got other people in the podcast community that have shows that would like to have Jim or me, or Jim and me on, and we're just starting this podcast thing. I already had somebody, a perfect one, seemed to get cold feet. I'm going to try to talk them out of it. But podcasts are the way to go, man. Jim had been on enough of them. If we get him on enough podcasts, then he's going to get on Laura Ingraham, and then people will start having it's another front where we can press this.
A lot of people are scared of this story. They are truly scared of this, and so I commend you all for.
Well, they want it to be a mystery. Everybody loves a good mystery to the extent that they don't even really want to have to seize on a solution and test it.
It was different. I was all excited to hear something different. Actually, you know.
Yeah.
You know?
Same with me. Yeah, still just same old shit. Yeah.
Well,
No,
I actually am friends with 2 really big shows, and I can
Are
get
you?
you. Yeah, I can get you guys on both of those shows.
Glad I
also,
said
so-
something. Thank you so much, brother. That means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'll get the ball rolling on that. I can get you guys on Tinfoil Hat and Sean Kelly. So
Love it, man. Know both of them.
awesome.
Jim's a good
Okay.
one, and I promise I won't even come on the next one. Y'all were already friends, but Jim can talk. I mean, he's a good as a podcaster myself. He's a good guest.
I was
And
really
you-
impressed.
Oh
with
no,
both
no,
of you
yeah,
guys.
no, he definitely was.
John, you can cut him up into clips. You know, we got some killer clips. If you go to Cosmic Summit and look up Jim, you know, because he talks fast. So within that minute and a half, he gets a hell of a lot in, right?
Oh no, he definitely dropped. A
I
lot
did
of
not want to become the face of this thing, y'all.
No,
I
you
tried to hand this off to professional people. I tried to hand it off to a professional biologist in 2022. He told me to get fucked. I tried to hand it off to a professional writer in 2023, a New York Times bestseller. He listened. He interviewed me for 4 hours and downloaded everything. And he's like, "Yeah, this is a Nobel Prize. I'm gonna go with it." And called me up the next day and said, "No, the wife won't let me." I don't think she wanted to lose the house because they thought in the 1% chance I'm wrong that it could be not good for them. And I
Blow
told
it
them,
up, boys. This is our kind of stuff. There are plenty of shows that would take this on.
well,
Oh, yeah.
for a lot of people to get nervous with it. And then, to wrap it up, I have a smoking gun email proving COVID was aerosolized by Vincent Munster, Tony Fauci's aerosol specialist in Rocky Mountain Lab, Fauci's biodefense lab in Montana. So once I got that, I went from not being on camera to being on camera, from 99% to 100%. I'm at 100.0%. So I did not hit publish on the book until I had that smoking gun email. It's a bit in the weeds. I'm not going to get into it here, but it shows the
a good
transmission
one.
of SARS-2 in that American lab rat called the Egyptian fruit bat. And it's so infectious. It's so contagious. It almost escaped the lab in
What's
Colorado.
Vince say back? What's he say back to the guy? Emails him, and what's he say back? You kind of got to know the whole story, but what?
Interesting results.
Yeah,
Yes.
interesting results.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
It was a very naive email from one of his colleagues back to him and said, "Hey, these bats I was growing for you in this bat lab in Colorado that I kept shipping you some samples of. Basically, the bats were basically being cratered between Colorado and Montana. They're transmitting SARS-2 efficiently. They're basically the reservoir host. They're showing disease and transmission without.
This is after pandemic.
Yeah, after the
So
pandemic.
somebody says, "Hey, man,
they're
look,
basically throwing the virus at every lab animal on the planet." And in the FOIA exchange from U.S. Right to Know, they caught the email between the culprit, Vincent Munster, and his naive underling. His name was Tony Shantz in Colorado. And in that email, I put it in front of a virologist. It's called the smoking gun email, or at least it's the way I call it. And once I got that email, I went from 99% to 100. And I never was on camera. And now
right
I'm-
up there with Fauci's game on. Email.
Yeah, I've even put the email in front of Fauci, and I'm like, "That's game over for you, Fauci."
Game off.
Oh, that's awesome, dude. You have balls. I love it.
He
And
does have balls.
Jim, this is your baby, bro. You put so much blood, sweat, and tears into this. I would hate to see you try to hand it off to somebody. You need to take this to the finish line, man.
Thanks for that. And I will, Brad, I guess.
Yeah,
I've now become the face of this damn thing for better or for worse. George said it best, if you're the only one that knows the details and can talk about it semi-coherently, you're going to wind up being the spokesperson for it. But it would have been better to put a professional scientist in this chair that I'm in. And they're not, it's not going to happen,
man.
That's the problem. You will not get a professional scientist to talk about this. They're scared shitless. They're
I'll
scared
take the
shitless of
most
me.
dogged
They're
of
scared
the
shitless
8
of this.
billion uncredentialed.
They're the biggest cowards on the block. They really are. They look all nice and professional and educated in that ivory tower with their white lab coat on. But when it comes to ratting out one of their own, it's probably, from their own perspective, it's probably a suicide career. If not, they have to rely on each other for references, for jobs, for postdocs, for all that stuff. And for one of them to come out and do it would be, just career suicide. So, but yes, one of their own did rat them out. It was just unknowingly. It was a naive email. "Hey, man, this SARS-2 thing is transmitting efficiently in these bats I was providing you. What's up with that?"
Okay, I've just looked. Not one additional signature during the live
shit.
stream. So
Gotta
all
refresh.
those people out there, you think
Hit
just
that shit.
one person will go to carolinaflu.org. I tell you,
Right
you can
now.
be
It's because they're
one-
busy listening, George. They're listening.
Yeah,
They're going to do it
yeah,
afterwards.
I'm not
Have
getting down
faith,
on them. I
George.
gotta be careful with that. I mean, everybody, but you can sign anonymously too.
Gotta
and
have faith.
1/3 of people are signing anonymously. How pitiful is that?
We
Not
got
for good people.
somebody signed. We got somebody in the chat's like, they've already signed.
Oh, let me refresh.
Yeah. Yeah. People are looking for it right now. There you go. It's good to call them out.
GoOnAPlay.org.
We got ninja watchers out there. Let's make sure everybody comes out of the darkness and signs this petition.
The signature per effect is greater than any damn thing you will ever sign in your life. It was not going to take 10 million signatures to get Carolina to go, oh shit, man. We need to have an investigation.
Nick, you should put it back in the chat, the link.
Another private. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't mean to be a crank, but
oh no, I even have it for people listening too. I also have it inside the show notes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
And I just signed it while you were talking too. No, it's good that you bring that up, man, because people they get so caught up in listening, like what Brandon said, and so if I don't remind people about certain things that I have going on, they'll be like, "Why did you tell me about it?" I'm like, that's right. So.
Yeah, and it's a secure, easy, professional process. We're reviewing each of the signatures. It was kind of, I don't know, I guess a compliment that when people started putting in Bilbo Baggins and things like that, somebody was in there messing around with it and had to go put in an authorization thing. But probably Fauci, right?
No, he wouldn't do that. It's another signature.
Yeah, right.
They use dead people to vote for them. So
yeah, right.
That's y'all are great. All right, yeah. So I think we'll just wrap it up here. Thank you, everybody, man. I thought this was an amazing show. I really had a great time. I thought this was really interesting, Jim and George. This was great stuff. Totally different take. I'll let everybody real quick. Just let everybody know where they can find yourself. Kaiva, please let everybody know what's up with you.
Awesome. This was great. Thank you so much. Everybody can find me at 11KaivaRose33.com. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Brandon.
Sup, everyone. This was fantastic. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, George. Both. Yeah, this is amazing. Yeah, there's a lot going on out there in the world, and we need to have more voices and to raise the community so that energy can move forward, so we can bring light to the darkness. It's crazy out there, and we got to ground ourselves in some sanity or become more insane than those who are already insane. So tonight, Kaiva and I are doing a show here in probably a half hour. And we're going to be talking about how Amazon is burning books, not just burning them. They're actually taking them, scanning them, and then throwing them away. Rare books in this world. And I think it's leading us more into how everything's going digital and how easy it is going to change things. Let's say, for instance, for this book that Jim very well put together, and it's got all this information, and now it's just all digital, how easy it is to change those types of things. And so buy actual books. So at 7:30 or in the next half hour, Kaiva and I will be going live on our show tonight and breaking down that as well as much more. You can find me at Magazine the Media. Subscribe, like, and share. And I will be putting all my stuff out on Spotify and Apple here soon. And Nick, it's just crushing it as the Cardinal Electric head, as you always are, bringing on the best and doing it, and we do it together. So
thank you, for real, appreciate it, man. Catalyst, I'm so glad you made it, dude.
I'm glad I came in for this one too. I was like, they're gonna hate me, but no, this has been a great episode. You guys can find me at White Rabbit Podcast. I'm on all platforms. YouTube just gave me my channel back after a 5-year ban. And so please go subscribe to my YouTube channel. I just got it back, And so fresh start over there, but usual suspects, Rumble, Apple, all those places you can find me. Just look up White Rabbit Podcast. I'm also the co-host of Trinity of Truth, and that is live every Wednesday on YouTube as well. And just find me on Instagram. And if you want to get a hold of me, my easiest contact to get a hold of me is catalyst@yahoo.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, sir, for real. I'm really glad you made it. And Judith, please, the Loon, let everybody know what's up with you.
Thank you for having me, Jim, George. Thank you for the work you're doing. It's actually wonderful. We need to get the word out on this, and everyone else. You can find me on YouTube, X, and Spreaker as the Loon.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And George, please, anything you want to promote, mention real quick?
Yeah. Well, I've already pushed really hard cosmicflu.org, of course. But if you want to kind of follow what we're doing at Cosmic Flu, the best place would be my personal X account now, which is Cosmic Tusk at whatever in the hell it is. I don't know, at Cosmic Tusk. I think George Howard bring it up too. And also my Facebook account is I'm kind of documenting this stuff. And then finally, just all the other stuff I'm into is at Cosmic Summit, all platforms. Thank you very much for having us.
Oh, of course. Thank you. And Jim, please let everybody know what's up with that book and anything else you want to tell them.
Yeah, the book's on Amazon. $20 for the hard copy, 10 for the Kindle. I should lower it, but it's what it is. I'm not too lazy to do that. But the Substack's free. It's Reverse Engineering the Origins of SARS-CoV-2 on Substack. That's where I put out a weekly newsletter, basically.
Oh, wow.
Crucifying the people that did this to us. And I get into some gory details in there. But then on Twitter, I'm even more gory there somehow. JHAS5 is where I test out my crazy
Jim
ideas.
has some sharp elbows if you like to see it mix up, man. It is spicy.
What was your X account, Jim?
JHAS5. J has 5. It's under my name, Jim Haslam.
Yeah, I just started following you too, pushing that.
Yeah. So it's a bit vile, but I'm a bit vulgar there, and they haven't censored me because of it. So thank God for that. So we'll keep tweeting until they take that away from me.
Yeah. Nice.
Well, thank you so much. I really thought this was great. Amazing work. Really. I really hope other people get you guys on and listen to this, because it's definitely a different take, and you seem to have got your receipts. It's rather impressive. So
we need to infect them. At us
asymptomatically.
Get it moving.
Yep. Everybody, thank you here for making the show. I thought it was awesome. Everybody in the chat, that's what's up. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the comments. That's why we go live. And that's the end of this one. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.